Since thousands of years ago, the Zen tradition has shown humanity a simple yet profound path. The path of returning to the natural stillness of one's own mind, not through lofty rituals or rigid discipline, but through the art of stopping. Stopping the chase, stopping the resistance, and stopping the attempt to become someone else, because sometimes everything we seek has already been present in this very breath. Tonight, as you sit perhaps in a quiet room or under the dim light of late night, let the words that follow become a gentle echo within you. They are not remote teachings, but wisdom speaking directly into the deepest part of your heart, the part that always knew peace had never left, only been hidden by layers of thought, worry, and the desire to control. So before we begin, let us slow our breathing. Feel the body being supported. Allow yourself to rest, if only in this moment. This evening's journey does not lead you to find something new, but to return. Return to the wisdom of Zen, which teaches us that sometimes the most profound thing is not in doing more, but in knowing when to stop intervening. When we release the desire to control the world, finds its rhythm again, and in that moment, peace begins to breathe with us. Have you ever tried to keep everything perfect only to have, in a fragile instant, everything crumble before your eyes? A shattered painting, a word spoken that slipped beyond control, a relationship cracked, unrepairable. What hurts us is not only what was lost, but the lingering whisper in our mind, if only. It is in that very moment when we resist what is that suffering begins. The student of Zen is not taught how to avoid mistakes, but how to stand still in the face of the unchangeable. Not to deny loss, but to see clearly that within loss, life continues quietly, profoundly, and truly. That morning in the rock garden of the ancient temple, the rain fell in shards like silver threads. The old pine leaves gently stirred, reflecting droplets falling onto the damp ground. The air was so still that one could hear the wind gliding through the folds of a robe and the tea steam rising like a thin veil. In that scene, the tea master Rikyu was preparing a tea ceremony to receive a noble lord. Every gesture of his rinsing the kettle, pouring water, raising the cup, was as light as a prayer. In Zen, the tea ceremony is not merely the art of making tea, but the art of living with each breath. Every droplet of water that falls, each movement of the hand, each silence between two breaths, all are rituals of awakening. But even in that perfect stillness, impermanence is always present silently, unpredictably, like a guest uninvited. And in that very moment when everything seemed complete, the deepest lesson of Zen began to unfold. A young apprentice named Jiru was assigned to carry a basin of water into the tea room. The rain still lightly fell, the stone floor covered with a thin coat of shimmering moss. He stepped carefully, both hands lifting the full basin, his heart taut like a bowstring, because he knew this was his master's most important tea ceremony. But in one instant, one raindrop landing on his wrist, one small slip, and everything collapsed. The sound rang in the silence like a knife cutting the surface of a still lake. The heavy basin crashed down, Water splashed everywhere, soaking the tatami mats, seeping into the white chrysanthemum petals, and shattering the precious kettle lid that Master Rikyu had used for many years. The air froze. Everyone stood silent, their breaths caught. Jiru fell to his knees, hands trembling, face as pale as ashes. "Master, I ruined everything." His voice cracked, lost in the sound of rain. Everyone expected the inevitable, a scolding. An angry glance, for this ceremony was the result of many days' preparation. A small mistake had shattered the very perfection that Master Rikyu had upheld in every detail, but the tea master was silent. He looked at the ruined scene with eyes gentle as a lake after rain, without a ripple. After a moment, he spoke, slow, soft, yet resonant, like a bell striking the heart. "No, you have not ruined anything. You merely spilled the water." The room remained utterly still. The onlookers bowed their heads. No one dared to speak further. Rikyu approached, picked up the drenched kettle, set it aside, then continued. "Dry it. The water has spilled. We do not need to spill more anger." That sentence, so simple that it bordered on ordinary, actually contained the essence of Zen. No blame, no lament, no attempt to salvage the past, just facing reality, seeing it doing what needed to be done in the present. Jiru bowed his head, tears mingling with raindrops. In his master's kindly gaze, he realized mistakes do not truly bring a person down. Only the resistance to mistakes shatters the mind. And so, in that rainy morning, between wet mats and withered flowers, the tea ceremony continued simply, humbly, yet more deeply than ever. No longer a ceremony of perfection, but a ceremony of awakening. One drop of water spilled and an entire mind was cleansed. Master Rikyu's words appeared ordinary, but in truth were a living Zen koan. The water has spilled to the ear, only a statement of fact, but to the one who understands, a direct glimpse into the nature of the present. People suffer not because the water spilled, but because within them the wish that it never had spilled disturbs them. We live in the past, trying to turn back time to repair what has passed. But the more we resist, the deeper we fall into suffering. We argue with the past and lose every time. The Buddha and the Four Noble Truths taught, suffering arises from attachment, from the clinging to what we want to hold on to. The tighter the grasp, the deeper the suffering. Rikyu did not allow his mind to be swept into that event. He did not resist, nor did he justify, nor did he blame. He simply saw clearly that everything that has occurred lies within the law of impermanence. Like water stirred becomes muddy the more it is agitated. Only when we let go does the water settle by itself. In that stillness, the lesson becomes clear. There is nothing to blame. There is nothing to salvage. Just look directly into the present and see it exactly as it is. That is the path of the practitioner, living in this moment, no more, no less, without judgment. If you have ever dropped a favorite cup, you will understand. The pain is not in the broken shard, but in the sigh. That was my favorite cup. If the friend you love says something hurtful, the pain is not only in the words, but in the thought. They should not have done that to me. Suffering does not come from the event, but from the desire for the event to be different. This world, like a river, only knows how to flow forward, not turn back. Everything drifts onward no matter how much we cling. Zen does not teach us to deny emotion, nor does it demand we fake calmness. Zen only teaches, do not make emotions a home in which you live forever. Rikyu did not deny the chaos of that moment. He did not avoid it, nor pretend to be serene. He simply saw, then acted from stillness. He told his apprentice to air the mats, wipe the floor, arrange the kettle again, then return to the ceremony as if nothing needed fixing. Outside, the rain ceased. Weak sunlight filtered through the pine branches, falling onto petals still heavy with droplets. In that shimmering light, Rikyu smiled. If the water had not spilled, how would we have seen this light? That was the teaching of one who had seen the Dharma in impermanence, that even in the mistake, the beauty never left the world, only waiting for us to still ourselves enough to recognize it. The senior student standing nearby, unable to hide his hesitation, softly asked, Master, why do you not regret? All the preparation, everything lost in a moment. Rikyu looked at him, eyes gentle but profound. I only saw water spilled on the floor, he answered. But I did not see the anger spilling in the mind. Water dries quickly, but anger lasts long. That sentence, light as a breath, yet enough to still a whole swirling stream of consciousness. That is the heart of Zen, where a person is no longer carried away by automatic reactions, but begins to look directly at the root of suffering. Anger or regret never arises from the event, but from how we react to it. If one does not introspect, the mind will continue to create new karma, then again produce suffering like the wheel of samsara, never stopping. In the Sanyutta Nikaya, the Buddha taught, one who knows letting go even of a single thought is walking out of the stream of suffering. Rikyu did not need to teach that sutta, he embodied it in every gesture. His equanimity was not indifference, but awareness, seeing what is happening and adding nothing. No judgment, no blame, no forcing oneself to forgive. Just seeing, then letting everything flow like water after the rain, clear, calm, and bright. In life, we cannot prevent the water from spilling, but we can learn not to let the mind spill along with it. A wise person does not attempt to avoid trouble, but learns how to walk through it without becoming attached. Like one rowing a boat on the sea, the waves that rise are not the fault of the sea. What matters is not to resent the wave, but to hold the oar steadily, so the boat goes the right way in harmony with the wind. Zen is like that. Not resisting life's current, but not letting oneself be swept away either. Neither fighting nor letting go blindly, but knowing presence amidst impermanence. Many people say I'm afraid to make mistakes, but it is precisely the fear of mistakes that causes people to err even more. When the mind is bound by anxiety, every action becomes forced, no longer natural. Rikyu understood that. He did not reprimand Jiru for the error, but taught him through his own serenity, so that he could see that when the fear of error falls away, a person truly begins to learn. And in that moment, the lesson of Zen was no longer in words, but in the very presence of stillness. When you feel regret or anger, do not rush to act. Stop for one breath. Do not try to fix. Do not try to justify. Just look deeply at that emotion as you would watch a raindrop fall to the ground. Ask, is this drop real Or is it only an image I created in my mind? Then inhale slowly, exhale fully. The emotion will gradually dissolve like water soaking into earth. Because all emotions, no matter how strong, are impermanent. They only stay long when we try to hold them, stir them, make them become me. If we don't stir, the water will settle by itself. If we don't resist, peace will return. That is mindfulness in daily life, aware amidst dis-ease. No need to sit hours in the meditation hall. No need for complex chanting. Just recognize the moment the mind begins to resist and pause there in the breath, in the stillness, because it is precisely in that pause that the Dharma begins to reveal itself. Acceptance is not weakness. Acceptance is seeing things as they are, then acting from the clearest place in your heart. Rikyu did not give up. After the water was spilled, he quietly cleaned, arranged everything again, prepared the ceremony as if nothing had happened, because when the mind is not entangled, anything can begin again without losing energy. In the suttas, the Buddha likened the wise person to a mirror, reflecting all forms, but retaining none. Rikyu was that mirror. He saw the mistake, but did not let the mistake leave a mark in his mind. That is why he could shine light for others, unshadowed by the darkness of past. And we often hold on to every image in our heart, then call it memory. In fact, most of what we call memory is only a stain on the mirror of mind marks not yet cleaned by understanding and letting go. The next morning, the tea ceremony was held again. No elaborate rituals, no meticulously arranged incense, no lavish display. Only the hot kettle-thin smoke rising in the still space and the serene faces of those present. Rikyu sat by the wooden table, poured tea with slow hands. He looked around and smiled. This flavor is no different than yesterday. Only today no one is afraid to spill anymore. The room erupted in laughter. Light laughter, not loud, but spreading like wind through pine trees. In that laughter, there was release, there was gratitude, and there was a ray of wisdom when a person learns not to tie themselves to what has passed. Rikyu placed the teacup down, eyes gentle. Do not pray for a life that never breaks. Pray for a mind that does not break with life. That phrase sounded like the wind across a lake. No one answered, but everyone felt something profound, that when the mind does not break, everything can begin again. Now, if you are listening to these words, please close your eyes for a moment. Think of something recently that hurt you, perhaps an event that did not go as you wished, or words from someone that wounded you. Then simply view that image as Rikyu viewed the spilled basin of water. No judgment, no blame, no if only. Just breathe and look. And when you can quietly say within your mind, the water has spilled, if that phrase is spoken with genuine calm, you will feel within you an opening. That opening is not empty, it is full of light relief, for in that space suffering cannot cling, and in that very moment, you have touched mindfulness. Late afternoon, Rikyu sat by the veranda listening to the rain pattering on the old roof tiles. The space was damp and misty, the scent of pine leaves drifting in the breeze, mingling with the warm hint of tea. He softly spoke to Jiru, the apprentice still lost in reflection beside him. Do you see the water has spilled, but its sound still remains in the heart. If you are willing to listen, you will hear the miracle. Jiru looked up his eyes As if asking more, Rikyu simply smiled and let the rain speak for him. For the student of Zen, the sound of that rain is not merely a sound. It is the voice of impermanence, reminding that everything is flowing, as it is its nature, arising and passing, coming and going. Nothing held longer than this moment, when we truly listen to the rain, not through the veil of thought. We hear the Dharma speaking simple, natural, yet deeper than all words. Amidst that resonance, Rikyu closed his eyes, gently smiled. Today's rain reminds me of an old story of Zen Master Ryozen and the cracked bell. The bell had been cracked, seemingly worthless. Yet when the master struck it, the sound still rang long, clear, deep, and strangely beautiful. Someone asked, "The bell is broken. How can it still sound?" The master answered, "The bell is only broken in form, but the sound still rings in the mind of one who knows to listen." And now we will journey into that story, to see that even in brokenness, beauty has never left this world. Sometimes we see something broken and rush to conclude that it has lost all value. A person who once made mistakes, a relationship that has ended, a dream that stopped halfway. But in the eyes of one with wisdom, nothing ever truly breaks. Only its form changes, while the essence of life continues to sing its own melody. That morning, mist wrapped around an ancient temple deep within the cedar forest. The air was so still that the sound of dry leaves touching the ground could be heard clearly. Inside the main hall, a great bronze bell which had echoed for 100 years now lay tilted to one side. A long crack ran along its body like a deep wound left by time. A young novice named Enso stood beside it, eyes heavy with sadness, softly saying, "The bell is broken, Master. How can it ever ring for our chance again?" Zen Master Ryozen stepped forward, placed his hand on the bell's cold surface, feeling the breath of old bronze. He replied quietly, voice low like wind through the forest, "The bell is broken, but the sound remains if only you know how to listen." Those words left Enso silent. He looked at his master, then at the cracked bell again. How could something shattered still produce sound? How could there be tone when the bell itself was gone? That question was not only for the boy on that misty morning, it is for all of us. How many times in life have we stood before something broken and thought it was the end? But perhaps in that very moment of breaking, the true sound of life begins to ring. From that day on, Ryozen's words became a living Zen koan in Enso's heart, and a question for each of us to pause and listen to. Do the broken things in our lives truly lose their value, or are they simply changing shape so we can learn to listen more deeply? Ryozen was known for his calm presence. He rarely taught with words. His lessons lived in each movement, each breath, each cup of tea poured in the early morning. That morning, while Enso still lingered beside the cracked bell, the master sat beneath the temple eaves brewing lotus tea. Steam rose and mingled with the fog drifting through the ancient trees. Looking into his teacup, Ryozen asked softly, "Enso, do you hear anything?" The boy listened and replied, "No, master, only silence." Ryozen smiled. In that silence, the bell's sound is still here. Enso frowned. He didn't understand. How could something broken still sound? How could silence be the ringing? The master walked toward the bronze bell, where dim light touched the long-heeled crack. "When you see the crack, you only see loss," he said slowly. "But I see the place where sound can pass through." He bent down, picked up a small wooden stick, and gently struck the bell. A tone arose, no longer clear and round as before, but low, coarse and deep, like the earth's sigh. It spread through the fog, touched the forest, echoed off the mountain walls, then returned like a distant song of impermanence. The temple fell still. The broom stopped. The footsteps ceased. Everyone listened, a sound not perfect, but carrying something deeper than perfection itself, the truth of existence. A nun standing afar quietly wiped her tears. Enso looked at his master, then at the bell, as if seeing beyond comprehension. For that tone, rough and incomplete, reached the deepest part of the human heart, the place that had once been broken, yet still could love, still could feel, still could respond to life. Ryozen silently watched the moved faces around him, then said, his voice gentle but resonant. The bell cracked, so its tone changed, but the essence of sound was never lost. Just as when this body grows old, the mind remains bright. When the heart is wounded, the capacity to love still lives. If only you don't close the door. That teaching rang out through the morning mist like another bell, not of bronze, but of the human heart. It echoed the Buddha's words from the Nikaya. In this body of 5 aggregates, though impermanent, there shines the light of awareness, unborn, undying. That light is the Buddha nature within each of us, not bound by form, pain, or time. Many think enlightenment means perfection, flawless, unbroken. But Zen speaks not of perfection, but of wholeness within imperfection. Like that bell, though cracked, it still rings a sound that quiets the heart. Ryozen knew only when a person dares to face their own cracks, to accept their incompleteness, does the sound of life grow deep. Sometimes breaking is not loss, but the way the universe opens a space for light to enter. He looked at Enso and told an old story. One day, a man dropped his precious mirror. A crack ran diagonally across its face. He wanted to throw it away, thinking it ruined. But that night, when the moonlight touched it, the crack reflected the light into 2 silver streams crossing like twin rivers. The moon in that broken mirror was more beautiful than ever before. Ryozen smiled. You see, when the mirror broke, it didn't lose its reflection. It simply reflected differently. If your mind is still enough, you'll see the moon within the crack. The image struck deeply in Enso's heart. He realized beauty does not come from perfection, but from how we face what has been lost. The Buddha once said, "The wise are not afraid of impermanence. They use impermanence to see the eternal." That cracked bell with its low, trembling tone was that very lesson-made sound, that true beauty lies not in wholeness, but in the ability to see the moon within your own fracture. After that day's chanting, Enso came to his teacher eyes filled with quiet sorrow. "Master, I understand the bell still rings. But how can a broken heart still love?" Ryozen looked at him, smiling softly, like sunlight after rain. "Listen carefully to the bell today. Its sound is no longer pure, but it lasts longer. Because within every tone, there is both pain and acceptance." Those words fell gently like mist, but soaked in deeply, like the first rain of spring. A person who has suffered yet keeps compassion, their love runs deeper than that of one who has never known pain. For they have passed through the crack and seen that suffering is not the enemy, but the teacher. When a seed cracks, the sprout can emerge. When the heart cracks, the light of wisdom can enter. That is the paradox of spiritual growth, where pain is no longer a chain, but a doorway to compassion. In modern psychology, they call it resilience, the strength that rises after loss. But in Buddhism, it goes deeper. It is the transformation of karma into wisdom, the process where pain no longer controls us, but becomes the material through which we understand life and love. When you stop resisting loss, you are no longer its victim. You have awakened within impermanence. And there is something Ryozen often reminded his students. The sounds that move the human heart most are never perfect ones. They carry traces of being human. A slight tremble, a breath, something real. Only such sounds hold the warmth of life. Zen is the same. As long as the mind strives to be better, it still resists itself. Only when the mind can accept itself as it is, hurt, tired, or unfinished, does true stillness appear. Ryozen never taught through theory. He let his disciples hear the cracked bell to listen to imperfection and find the wholeness within it. That was his teaching of Kanyeran emptiness, shunyata. Not the nothingness people fear, but the freedom from attachment to form, to sound, to the crack itself. The bell is cracked, yet rings a living truth of non-self. There is no true me in the tone, the form, or the fracture. All things arise through conditions. When conditions change, the form changes. But the luminous knowing, the Buddha nature, remains untouched. Just as when we see the moon's reflection scatter in a pond and say, "The moon has broken, yet the moon in the sky has never been broken." If within you there is also a crack, a loss, an imperfection, try what Ryozen once taught Enso. Don't try to mend it. Place your hand upon it and listen. Listen beneath the pain. Perhaps you'll hear an unspoken love, perhaps a wish to be understood. And if you are quiet enough, you will hear your own bell, the resonance of life still ringing even as its form has changed. Sit, still take a deep breath. As you exhale, imagine lightly tapping the crack in your heart, not to fix it, but to hear its tone. For healing is not about erasing the break, but learning to hear the beauty within it, where your heart becomes most true, tender, and close to Buddha nature. Master Ryozen once said, "The wise do not fear the crack, for they know that their Buddha nature is singing. Those words ring like a bell in the vast silence. Only when we dare to look into our own cracks can we hear the deepest sound of life, where pain and beauty merge as one. In the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha taught all that has form is illusion. If you see that forms are not forms, you see the Tathagata, meaning every form is empty. To see beyond form is to see the Buddha. If you see the bell only as something broken, you see just the form. But if you can hear the sound still echoing, you have seen the Buddha, the invisible yet ever-present essence within each breath of life. Likewise, when you look into yourself, don't only see faults, failures, or what's incomplete. See within them the seed of wisdom, sprouting the Dharma, resonating through every crack in your soul. Compassion is not about protecting what is weak, but about seeing it with eyes free of judgment. Because when you can love even the cracks within your own heart, you will no longer fear breaking. For only what no longer fears breaking can never truly break. Evening descended. Clouds parted. A warm golden light spread across the cedar forest. Master Ryozen sat still on the stone steps, eyes half closed, listening to the bell softly ringing in the wind. Its sound was no longer even, but blended with the distant stream and the falling leaves, forming a melody of stillness, simple yet profound. He whispered, as if speaking to the wind itself. Do you see? The sound doesn't come only from the bell. When your mind no longer separates, this is bell, that is wind, you'll hear the Dharma, the sound of life, breathing with you. Enso asked, Master, then the sound of the water in the stream, is that also the Dharma? Ryozen smiled, eyes kind like the day's last light. If your mind is as clear as water, every sound is a sutra. Then he rose, walking slowly down the stone path toward the stream. The last ray of sunlight touched his robe, shimmering like golden bells. The murmur of the stream intertwined with the faint tone of the distant bell, two flows meeting in selflessness. And thus, the story closes only to open another journey, where water continues the teaching of impermanence and balance the story of Isamu drought and flood. A lesson on how the human heart learns equilibrium between emptiness and fullness, anger and compassion, holding and letting go. Have you ever wondered why life sometimes feels so dry that there's nothing left to believe in, and then suddenly it floods everything away, leaving you breathless and unsteady? Why are there times when everything stops eerily silent, and then without warning, all the storms come at once, as if the universe is testing how much you can endure? In Zen, it is said, there is no drought or flood, only a mind that does not know balance. Neither rain nor sunshine has ever truly caused suffering. It is the mind that resists the weather that suffers. That afternoon, a small village lay along the mountainside. The earth was cracked. The grass burned yellow, the ponds dried to stone. Villagers climbed up to the temple, their faces marked with worry. On the hill among whispering pines stood the small monastery of Master Isamu, who often sat beside an old well chanting silently. When the villagers arrived, they knelt and pleaded, voices trembling. Please, Master, perform a ceremony to call for rain. The fields are dry, and we're losing everything." Isamu looked at them with eyes gentle and deep as the temple well. He said softly, "Before praying for rain, look and see how dry your own hearts have become." And so the rain ceremony began, not with incense or chants, but with a return inward, where each person relearned how to listen for the first drop falling from their own heart. 3 days later, the villagers gathered again before the temple. The wind carried the scent of dry earth mingled with faint incense, and the soft sobs of children near withered offerings. Everyone believed that today, Master Isamu would perform a miracle to bring the rain. But Isamu simply placed a bowl of water in the middle of the courtyard. Sunlight shimmered across its surface like glass. He looked to the sky and said calmly, "I do not pray for rain to come. I pray for thirst to lessen." His words puzzled many. Someone whispered, "What does he mean if the rain doesn't come, all the crops will die?" Isamu said nothing. He took a bamboo stick and gently stirred the water in the bowl. Ripples spread, catching the light like waves of gold. "Look closely," he said. "The water still moves. Without rain, it still knows how to change." A breeze swept by, stirring the bowl's surface. A curious boy asked, "But wind only makes water tremble. How can that save the fields?" Isamu smiled. "It's like when you worry, you stir your mind endlessly. But the root of suffering isn't outside of you. It lies in the place that refuses to be still." Before he could finish, clouds gathered from the mountains. Moments later, rain poured heavy, rushing, washing away the cracks in both earth and heart. The villagers cheered, believing the master had called the rain. But Isamu looked up to the sky and said softly, "Rain does not come from prayer, but from silence shared by all who listen." Yet soon, the rain did not stop. Winds grew, wild waters rushed down the slopes, swallowing everything in their path. Homes by the river sank into muddy torrents, and the fields turned into a churning sea. Cries for help echoed across the hills. Once again, the villagers ran to the temple, drenched and terrified. "Master, stop the rain. Please save us," they cried. Isamu sat under the temple eaves, still as stone eyes gazing at the raging waters below. He spoke slowly, each word sinking into the sound of the storm. "Yesterday you prayed for rain. Today you pray for it to stop. All our lives we keep changing roles from the thirsty to the fearful." He closed his eyes, his voice low and steady. "Drought and flood are both teachings of the mind. When it is dry, learn to nourish. When it overflows, learn to release. If you only know how to beg, you will always thirst, because you have never learned to listen." In Buddhist teaching, there is a path called the middle way. Neither indulgence nor asceticism. But Isamu knew the middle way is not merely a way of living. It is the state of a balanced mind, free from extremes, calm as a steady breath. The human heart is like nature. When filled with craving, it becomes a dry sky. Compassion cracks, faith withers, and life burns within its own desire. When given up entirely, it becomes a flood, overflowing, directionless, drowning in its own emotions. The middle way is not a line between two ends, but the wisdom of awareness, knowing when to reign and when to rest, knowing when to act and when to be still, neither forcing nor avoiding, neither controlling nor fleeing, like a wise gardener who cannot command a flower to bloom early nor hold its petals from falling. He simply tends waters and waits quietly. That is the art of mindfulness, seeing without interfering, allowing life to blossom in its own time. After the flood, Isamu quietly walked down to the village, helping people gather what remained of their homes, salvaging fragments of their lives. A young man shoveling mud with tears on his face said, "Master, why is my life always like this? Empty one moment, swept away the next." Isamu didn't answer right away. He picked up a broken branch carried by the flood and planted it in the damp soil. "Do you see," he said, "when the earth is too dry, it cracks. When too wet, it drowns. But when moist, just enough trees can grow." Then he looked into the man's eyes. The human heart is the same. Too dry, and you feel nothing. Too wet, and you drown in your own feelings. The wise stand in the middle, aware, but not swept away. Isamu smiled gently, eyes soft as water after rain. Many people say they want peace forever, but peace is not the absence of wind and sun. Peace is the mind that does not fall when the wind blows and does not burn when the sun rises. The young man fell silent. He understood suffering does not come from life's harshness, but from not knowing how to stand between the two shores, between thirst and flood, holding and letting go. In Zen, water is the image of the mind. When clinging, it becomes thick and heavy, like dry earth, no longer alive, no longer reflective. When too loose, it rushes like floodwaters, losing clarity, sweeping everything away. Both move us away from our true nature. The meditator learns to let the mind be like still water, not forcing it to be clear nor fearing when it's cloudy. Every thought, every feeling is only a passing ripple. When we stop stirring, the water clears on its own. So does the mind. When we stop interfering, it returns to its natural calm. The Buddha once taught, "When the mind is peaceful, the world is peaceful." Yet people often do the opposite, wanting the world to be calm first, before seeking calm within. Like the villagers, they pray for rain, then pray for it to stop, never truly listening to their inner weather. Those who see the Dharma simply smile. They know that the mind itself is the weather, and when the mind is at peace, every season is beautiful. When you feel dry, uninspired, joyless, don't blame life or yourself. It is simply the mind's signal, thirsting for the rain of mindfulness. Sit quietly, take a deep breath, and listen to it flow. Notice the small things light through the window leaves, brushing each other, warmth from your hands. Then you'll see rain does not fall from the sky, but from awakening within. And when emotion floods, anger, fear, grief, don't block the river. Just hold your breath steady, like one holding an oar through swift water. When breath slows, the current eases. Every day we go through small droughts, and flood's a harsh word that dries our trust, a message that floods our heart. If you observe closely, you'll see each change is a lesson in the middle way, in the art of keeping the mind soft like water, but never letting it be carried away. One day when the river had grown calm again, Isamu stood on its bank, watching the sky reflected in its pale blue surface. He said to his disciple, "Water is still water. When dry, we call it drought. When full, we call it flood. But water itself never suffers because of its shape. Only humans suffer because they want water to be different." His words echoed in the quiet like a bell. For this is the essence of Zen. Suffering arises when we reject what is. And happiness is not something to be found, but what appears naturally when resistance ends. Those who live by Zen do not cling to peace. They live within movement, walking through wind and water without fear. They do not fear drought, for dryness is time to rest. They do not fear flood, for water that rises will also recede. They realize that every loss is only another way the heart grows brighter, clearer, freer. Months passed. The dry and rainy seasons came and went. The earth revived, fields greened again, houses rebuilt, and laughter returned to the village. One morning, Enso, the former disciple of Master Ryozen, visited Isamu. Seeing the master watering flowers, he asked softly, "Master, after all these changes, how do you feel?" Isamu smiled, his eyes serene as water after rain. "I see that the earth has learned to breathe." Enso was surprised. The earth can breathe. "Yes," Isamu replied. "When dry, it cannot receive. When flooded, it cannot give. Now it is soft, able to receive and release. That is breath. Humans are the same. When they learn to receive and let go, their hearts become streams." Hearing this, Enso bowed. In the wind, he thought he could hear the echo of Ryozen's cracked bell, its tone now mingling with the river's gentle murmur, forming a hymn of impermanence and release. The bell taught him impermanence. The water taught him letting go, and both met in one truth, the wisdom of harmony. In modern life, we too live through our own droughts and floods. At times, work feels empty, inspiration gone. At others, change and responsibility surge all at once. But if we remember Isamu's lesson, we'll see we need not flee the drought nor fear the flood. We only need to balance our breath, and the mind will find its way home. When the heart feels dry, water it with gratitude by recalling the small things that nourish you daily. When the heart overflows dry, it with the light of mindfulness, knowing that emotion too is like rain. It comes and it goes. And when the heart feels turbulent, simply sit still and silent, letting the winds of life pass through without taking you with them. Zen does not teach us to control nature, but to befriend every season within ourselves. Only when we stop resisting does the mind truly learn to live in harmony with the weather of life. At dusk, Isamu sat by the river. The water ran clear and silent as if no flood had ever passed. A single yellow leaf fell spun once on the surface, then disappeared into the flow. He watched it and whispered, "The leaf does not know it is falling. only the watcher sees separation. Life, too, is never lost. It only changes form. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh earth after rain. The river glimmered like a mirror, reflecting the moments of impermanence. And in that stillness, Isamu realized true beauty is not in what lasts, but in how we accept change without sorrow. And so the next story begins a journey into the art of seeing impermanence without pain, of letting go lightly while keeping the heart open to life. There are moments so small in life that we often overlook them, yet they are enough to illuminate an entire lifetime. Like the moment a leaf falls, brief and silent, yet within it lies the full cycle of birth and decay, sprouting, flourishing, fading, and returning to the earth without a trace of complaint. When the mind still wants to hold on, we fear the falling leaf as if it were our own loss. But when we understand impermanence, we realize that every fall is a form of return, returning to the soil, to the root, to the natural flow of life. That morning, autumn had just begun. In the temple garden, a thin mist lingered and a soft breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant bird song. Zen master Xuan was sweeping the path that led to the old well. The worn bamboo broom moved slowly each stroke, like the rhythm of time being gently brushed away. His movements were not meant to clean, but to listen to the sound of change within stillness. A young novice passed by, seeing a yellow leaf fall to the ground, and asked, "Master, why must the leaf fall?" It didn't do anything wrong. The question was innocent, but it touched the deepest paradox of human life. We wish for beautiful things to last forever, while the universe itself was born to change. Xuan stopped watching the leaf swirl softly through the air and land at his feet. He asked, "You see the leaf fall, but are you sure it is lost?" The novice bent down, picked it up, and whispered, "It's dead, master." Xuan smiled, his eyes gentle like a lake after rain. "If death were truly the end," he said, "why does the leaf still smell sweet? Why does the soil grow richer from what you call loss?" He sat down, placed the leaf on his palm, and said softly, "The leaf doesn't fall because of sin, my child. It falls because it has fulfilled its purpose." The words were light as breath, yet they held the boy still for a long time. Xuan continued, "When green, the leaf does the work of a leaf. It welcomes sunlight and feeds the tree. When it falls, it does another work. It nourishes the earth. No stage is meaningless." He gazed toward the rustling branches. "But people, when they lose something, cry that life is unfair because they don't yet see their part in the great continuity. The leaf doesn't blame the wind, nor fear the ground. It simply follows nature's course, and in that act of falling, it fulfills its meaning. When the leaf falls, it doesn't ask, 'Why me?' It doesn't argue with the wind or search for reasons. Only humans do that because we forget that everything is traveling in the same direction homeward. The Buddha taught in the Sutra of Impermanence, all conditioned things are in constant change. They are not real, not lasting. But hearing impermanence with the ears is easy. Seeing impermanence with the eyes is hard because we mistake impermanence for loss. In truth, impermanence is the breath of life, the very rhythm that keeps the world alive. Without falling, how could there be sprouting? Without parting, how could there be meeting? Without decay, how could there be the birth of new blossoms? Master Shuan never preached impermanence with words. He taught it through his broom. Each sweep beneath the old pine was a reminder. I sweep not to clear the ground, but to remember that I too am a leaf. And when we see that truth, we no longer fear falling or loss. We simply smile like the leaf spinning in the wind, knowing that every ending is a form of returning. The novice looked at the leaf resting on the ground and asked, "If I am also a leaf master, then when I fall, who will pick me up?" Shuan lifted his gaze toward the misty sky. Morning light touched his face like the earth's own breath. "No one will," he said gently. "The earth is already waiting. You only need to fall at the right time." The boy blinked, puzzled. "What does it mean to fall at the right time, Master?" Shuan smiled softly, his eyes kind as a stream after rain. "It means when you have given enough, lived your part fully, and hold no regret." The boy bowed his head in silence, a strange feeling rising within him, a mix of sadness and peace, as if his teacher's words had touched the quiet fear that lives in every heart, the fear of being forgotten, of no longer being remembered when we're gone. Shuan set the broom aside, his voice deep yet gentle. Leaves do not fear being forgotten because they know that when they become soil, they will meet the roots again. And when the roots sprout, they will return as leaves once more. The boy looked up, eyes shimmering with something beyond words. Outside, the breeze stirred, and more leaves fell. The circle of life continued silent, complete without needing witness. That is the Dharma, the wondrous law of dependent arising, where nothing is ever lost, only transformed into another form of love. In Zen's view, nothing ever truly ends, only takes on new shapes. Death in the Buddha's wisdom is not loss, but continuation. Humans tremble whenever something slips from their grasp, a relationship, an opportunity, a loved one, but they forget everything falls at the right time. Without falling, life would choke on its own abundance. Like breath, we inhale to receive, but if we never exhale, we would die. Falling and letting go are the natural rhythm of life. Master Shuan understood this deeply. So whenever the wind swept through the garden, he simply tilted his head, smiling at each falling leaf, neither sad nor wistful, as if listening to a wordless sermon. In every falling leaf, he saw the Buddha teaching in silence that nothing truly disappears, it only changes form, and that letting go is the most beautiful way to remain in eternity. Each of us carries our own leaves in life, things that once sheltered and nourished us, but must someday fall an old friend, a chapter of youth, a belief once held dear. We grieve because we only see the falling, forgetting that every fall makes room for new growth. Just as the garden needs autumn to prepare for spring, the human heart needs moments of release to be reborn. If we keep the old leaves forever, how could new buds bloom? If we cling to what has passed, how can we receive the gift of now? In psychology, this is called emotional maturity, learning to let go without fear. In Buddhism, it is non-attachment, not clinging to what has been, not binding ourselves to form. And in Zen, it is awareness amidst change, observing every season of the mind, neither chasing the old nor fearing the new. For in the end, every season is beautiful if we are willing to stand still and listen to the sound of leaves falling. The next morning, the novice saw Master Shuan sweeping again. But the wind was stronger now. Leaves fell faster than they could be gathered. Frustrated, the boy sighed, "Master, no matter how much I sweep, the yard is still full of leaves." Shuan stopped and looked at him, eyes warm as sunlight through branches. "Do you sweep to clear?" he asked, "or to learn when to stop?" The boy blinked in confusion. The master set down the broom and pointed to the pile of leaves glowing under the light. When your mind stops wanting an ending, you'll see that every leaf is a lesson. None of them are waste. He picked up a few leaves and walked toward the pond. Dropping them onto the water, he said, "See, the leaves fall. The water moves, but the sky remains unshaken." The boy watched quietly, something inside him stilled. The practitioner Shuan said, must be like the sky, able to hold both the falling and the flowing without letting the heart be clouded. In that moment, even the wind seemed to pause, and all that remained was the stillness of understanding. There is nothing to sweep away, only things to see clearly. Likewise, when something leaves your life, do not rush to call it loss. See it as Shuan saw the falling leaf, gently with awareness. Instead of asking, "Why me?" ask, "What am I learning from this? What is being nourished by this falling?" For sometimes, what falls away is not ending, but making space for something greater to grow. Like the dry leaf that nourishes the soil for new sprouts, every ending is a subtle beginning if we can see it with awakened eyes. Each morning, take a moment to look outside to the trees, the sky, the changing light. Don't just see the scenery, see your own mind reflected within it. This is not merely watching nature, it is the practice of impermanence, the art of flowing with life without being carried away. And one day, when you can watch a leaf fall without sadness and see within it the quiet smile of the earth and sky, that is the day you will have learned the art of letting go and touched the deepest freedom within yourself. The Buddha once said, "One who lives amidst impermanence with a heart free of possession knows true love." A simple sentence, yet it holds the essence of enlightenment. The falling leaf carries nothing away, yet gives everything, returning to the earth, feeding the next spring. It is compassion in silence, without name, without recognition, without witness. For true love is not in holding on, but in allowing everything to move in its natural course. When we understand impermanence, we stop fearing change, for we see that every motion is natural. When we understand non-self, we stop seeing ourselves as the center, and we learn to let go, not out of exhaustion, but out of insight. And when compassion arises, we begin to see that every loss in life is in truth a form of offering. As evening fell and the pines swayed in the wind, Shuan said to his disciple, "The beauty of a leaf is not in its greenness, but in how it falls. The beauty of a monk is not in success, but in how he lets go lightly, peacefully, and completely." In the whisper of wind beneath the eaves, the young novice bowed deeply, hearing more clearly than ever. Each act of letting go is a blooming within the heart. As the autumn wind swept the courtyard, leaves filled the air like gold. The novice rushed to fetch the broom, but Shuan only smiled. "No need to sweep. Let them rest. Tonight, the moon will teach you what I cannot." When night came, the full moon rose into the clear sky. Its soft light spread across the courtyard, shining on the golden carpet of leaves. Each leaf seemed to turn into a tiny star glowing on the earth. The boy stood still, heart swelling with quiet awe. Now he understood what the master meant, that even the fall can shine if we learn to see with awakened eyes. He bowed hands together. He no longer asked why leaves fall, for he had seen if leaves never fell, the earth could not hold the moon. If there were no loss, light could never enter the heart. In silence, he smiled like one who has just heard the Dharma beneath the moon. In life, when someone leaves, when a door closes, do not resist. Like the final leaf of autumn, everything is returning to its true home, the place where beginnings and endings meet in peace. Learn to see life as a leaf sweeper does not choosing which leaves to keep, not blaming which ones fall, but quietly grateful for every color that has passed. For every leaf, withered or bright, is a small chapter in the vast picture of life. And one day when we ourselves become that leaf, we too will fall gently without regret, knowing that every separation is only another way of returning. The earth never forgets its leaves, just as the universe never forgets a soul that has added its note to the great symphony of existence. When you realize this, you no longer fear loss. You simply smile with the wind, knowing you too are on your way home at the right time, in the right place. As autumn came to an end, Shuan sat beneath his familiar tree, eyes lifted toward the pale sky. A light breeze stirred. The final leaf loosened, spinning softly before merging with the soil. Shuan watched it and smiled, his voice calm and warm. Every fall has its reason, and every reason leads back to stillness. The wind mingled with the distant sound of the temple bell, its tone lingering like a farewell to the old season. Within that echo, something seemed to close, and at the same time, something new was quietly beginning. In that pause between seasons, one could almost hear another story awakening, the story of the thief who found redemption, where the light of compassion can rise even from the darkness of wrongdoing, and where even the most lost soul can find the way back to light. Sometimes the path to enlightenment doesn't begin with light, but with the deepest darkness within a person. Some seek the way amid silent pine forests. Others find truth in the very storm of their sins. What truly separates a lost soul from one who awakens is not what they have done, but the moment they stop and dare to look deeply into themselves. Because in that still moment, the seed of awakening begins to sprout. It was a heavy, rain-soaked afternoon. Thunder rolled through the forest, reminding man of the fragile line between good and evil. Amid the downpour, a small monastery on the mountainside glowed with the warm light of a single oil lamp. Tetsu, an old gentle monk, sat quietly under the eaves, mending a worn robe. He neither preached nor lectured. He simply lived, radiating peace through every breath. The wooden door creaked open. A man, drenched and trembling, stepped inside, his eyes filled with fear. It was Goemon, a wanted thief, a man whose fate was about to meet a turning point that would change his life forever. He looked around. The small temple was empty, except for the old monk sitting beneath the dim light. Goemon gripped his knife tightly, his voice hoarse from cold and exhaustion. "Old man, give me money and food. I don't want to hurt you." Tetsu looked up, the gentle smile never leaving his face. "I have no money," he said softly, "but you may take some rice from the kitchen. And if you're cold, take this robe too." As he spoke, he removed the old garment he was wearing and placed it before the stranger. Goemon froze. No one had ever spoken to him in that tone, without fear, without disdain, only calm compassion. You're not afraid of me?" he asked, voice trembling. Tetsu replied, his eyes kind and serene like a still lake in autumn. "I only fear that you are hungry and cold. Whatever you need to survive tonight, take it." In that instant, something inside Goemon melted, a thick layer of ice he had carried through years of running. He ate quietly, each spoonful heavy with the weight of his sins. When he finished, Tetsu said gently, "Don't forget to give thanks when the rain stops, for this very rain has washed some dust from your heart." That night, beneath the cold forest canopy, Goemon sat alone and wept for the first time in years, not out of fear, but because in the darkness, he had felt the first trace of light. In the eyes of the enlightened, there is no one to hate, only lost beings in need of compassion. The Buddha once taught hatred never ends through hatred. Only love can end hatred. Tetsu understood this deeply. He did not try to preach, for he knew that one who is fleeing does not need philosophy, they need a place to rest. A wounded heart cannot hear teachings unless it is first embraced with kindness. Only when the heart is at rest can the seed of goodness take root. When Goemon held that bowl of rice, he was not just eating to survive, he was tasting trust for the first time in years. A man who has lived in suspicion cannot help but tremble when he is finally seen without judgment. That rice was salted with tears, warmed by human kindness, and flavored with something he had never known: unconditional love. That night, as rain continued to fall beyond the eaves, the thief realized Tetsu was not saving him through words, but through the way he lived, through an unafraid gaze and faith that goodness still slept within him. Years later, people still spoke of that stormy night as the turning point in Goemon's life. He left the village, lived quietly, no longer stealing, no longer running. They said he began working for hire, sharing his meager meals with the poor, and that each time rain fell, he would sit in silence, remembering the eyes that once looked at him with faith instead of judgment. One spring morning, when plum blossoms bloomed white around the monastery, Goemon returned. He brought a small sack of rice, a few silver coins, and a heart full of gratitude. Tetsu was sitting in meditation under a tree, as calm as ever. Seeing him, the monk smiled. "I knew you would return, not to repay a debt, but to live as who you truly are." Goemon knelt, voice breaking. "Master, why didn't you hand me over to the guards that night?" Tetsu opened his eyes, his gaze gentle as dawn on a lake. "Because I didn't see a thief. I saw a man who had lost himself." Tears fell onto Goemon's rough hands. In that moment, he understood that forgiveness is not forgetting wrongdoing. It is seeing the light still alive within the one who erred. And in that instant, he knew the old monk had not only saved his life, he had returned his soul. The story of Tetsu and Goemon is not just about a repentant thief. It is a parable of the two sides that exist within us all. Tetsu represents the light, wisdom, and compassion. Goemon represents the darkness, greed, fear, and doubt. These two are not enemies, but two faces of the same mind. Darkness reigns only when light is absent. Yet once a single spark of awareness is lit, darkness disappears, not because it's defeated, but because it never truly had substance. Tetsu knew this. He did not try to drive out the thief's darkness. He simply lit a small lamp within it, through acceptance and the quiet faith that goodness remained. His light came not from words, but from presence, calm, non-judgmental, and unwavering. In Buddhist teaching, true compassion makes no distinction. It doesn't say, "This one is worthy, that one is not." It is like the sun shining everywhere, asking no one if they deserve it. Even when turned away, its nature is still to give. That was Tetsu's life-teaching. Light does not need to be seen to exist, it only needs to be kept from going out. Have you ever realized that at times you too have been a Goemon in someone's story? When you've spoken words that hurt, made mistakes in moments of weakness, or lost someone's trust, you too have been lost. The difference is that you hide it better, naming it misunderstanding, fatigue, or not the right time. Yet in every lost journey, life always sends us a Tetsu, someone who does not judge, does not scold, but simply stays present, understanding, silent. That silence can awaken more than any advice. It is the power of mindfulness and compassion, two small lamps that can light even the deepest dark. No punishment, no persuasion, only fearless love. Because when someone is seen with understanding instead of judgment, they cannot help but want to become better. And perhaps that is how the world heals, through each gaze, each breath, each moment of tenderness. If someone has ever hurt you, don't rush to call them bad. Perhaps they are just another Goemon trembling in the dark of fear, hunger, and ignorance. No one is born wanting to do wrong. They simply didn't know how else to stop their pain. Instead of retaliation, try to look at them through Tetsu's eyes, not as a threat, but as a suffering being. When we respond with anger, Karma extends like fire fed with oil. But when we pause, breathe deeply, and choose understanding over hate, the flame begins to die. The Buddha taught karma is never fixed. Just one moment of clarity can turn an entire lifetime around. Each act of forgiveness not only frees the other person, it breaks a link in our own chain of suffering. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the strength of one who knows that light is always greater than darkness. The bowl of rice Tetsu offered was more than food, it was a silent Dharma teaching. Each grain carried the spirit of letting go, and faith, as if saying, I give not because you need, but because I wish to be free from possession. The robe he gave was not just warmth. It was an act of dissolving, self-erasing the boundary between me and you. Even the cold rain became a baptism for old karma, a chance to renew a weary soul. Through every detail, Zen whispers a way of living in awareness, to give not because others need, but because giving frees us from grasping. To receive not because we lack, but because every gift is a meeting of causes and conditions. The Buddha met thieves, murderers, and traitors, yet he never called them evil. He only said, they are not yet awake. For in the eyes of the Buddha, all beings can awaken. Enlightenment is not earned, it is remembered. Tetsu understood this. He did not try to change Goemon. He simply created a still space where the man could see his own light. That is the secret of all transformation. No one truly saves another. Each awakens only when seen with compassion. Each time you meet someone angry, selfish, or harsh, pause and whisper within, this person is hungry. Not hungry for food, but for understanding, for love, for a warmth they have never received. Those who harm are often those starving most for kindness. Instead of reacting, nourish them with Tetsu's attitude, calm, non-judging, unshaken. When you can hold compassion in the storm of another's mind, you not only cool their fire, you keep your own light steady. Gentleness is not weakness. It is the power of those who have learned not to be swept away by emotion. Just one pause before judgment opens the gate of wisdom, where we choose to understand rather than react, to love rather than wound. And in that moment, the world grows lighter, because one heart has awakened. In the years that followed, Goemon stayed at the temple. He didn't chant sutras or preach. Each morning, he quietly swept the courtyard, lit the fire, and cooked rice for travelers. When asked why he never left, he smiled. I once ate here. Now I wish to cook for others. That simple reply made Tetsu smile. He knew the seed of compassion had bloomed. True repentance needs no words, no bows. Before statues, it is shown through a life lived differently. Each bowl of rice he cooked, each leaf he swept, was a silent sutra. From a thief, Goemon had become a keeper of light, not through doctrine, but through the quiet presence of gratitude. At the end of the rainy season, the sky cleared pure and bright. Goemon sat beneath the eaves, watching the last drop fall from the roof into a small puddle. The water was so clear he could see his reflection, once dark, now calm like still water. He asked Tetsu, Master, is this water clear because it is still? Tetsu smiled gently. No. It is clear because it has nothing left to stir. The words were light as breath, yet deep as the Buddha's teaching on a tranquil mind. A mind untouched by praise or blame, unstirred by anything that is nirvana in the present moment. Goemon looked at the puddle, where his reflection and his teacher's blended in the fading light. No longer thief and monk, only the stillness of understanding. The final drop dissolved into the earth, just as his old karma had settled within his heart, and in the distance the wind softly opened the door of a small room where Tomiko, the blind woman with the dim mirror, was about to begin the next story: how to see oneself when there is nothing left to see outside. Have you ever looked in the mirror and suddenly couldn't recognize yourself? Not because time has etched wrinkles on your face, but because the light in your eyes, the one that once shone, has quietly faded. The face is familiar, yet the soul feels distant, as if the person in the mirror is looking back at you through someone else's eyes. That is the moment many people fear most, when the mirror of the mind begins to blur. Not because of dust on the glass, but because of the dust of worries, resentment, regret, loneliness accumulated over the years. This is the story of Mrs. Tomiko, an old woman blind in one eye, living alone in a small wooden house on a mountainside near an ancient temple. One morning, she brought a dusty old mirror to the temple, asking the monk for help. It no longer reflects anything she said. But what she truly wanted wasn't to clean the mirror. It was to find the image of herself she had lost somewhere between all those quiet, lonely years. That morning, dew still clung to the leaves, and the mountain wind carried the scent of incense from the temple. Under the old wooden eaves, the monk swept the courtyard, each movement slow like the breath of the earth. When he saw Mrs. Tomiko, he nodded gently. She placed the mirror carefully on the ground as if afraid it might break further. "Master," she said, her voice trembling, "my mirror has grown so dim. I've wiped it again and again, but it won't shine. I fear maybe it's reflecting something bad inside me." The monk looked at her for a long moment, then bent down to examine the mirror. Its surface was covered with thick layers of dust, cracked in places like the scars of time. He smiled softly. "The mirror isn't at fault," he said. "It's only been too close to the dust for too long." Mrs. Tomiko sighed, her trembling hands brushing the mirror's edge. "But I've cleaned it so many times and it still won't shine. Maybe it's lost the ability to reflect." The monk set his broom aside, dipped a cloth into a basin of clear water, and began wiping the mirror gently, layer by layer. The water seeped into the cracks, as if healing something deeper than the surface. He asked quietly, "Do you know what makes a mirror lose its clarity fastest?" She shook her head. "It isn't dust," he said. "It's the breath of the one looking into it when we stand too close and talk too much to ourselves." His words silenced her. A deep stillness spread between them, broken only by the whisper of the wind and the faint scent of incense. The monk continued, "The mirror is like the mind. The mind is naturally clear. But when we breathe with anxiety, speak with anger, and see through judgment, it becomes clouded, not by time, but by our own breath. He placed the cloth down and pointed to the mirror's surface, now partly clean. See, when you stop speaking for a while and let the breath settle, the dust begins to fall away on its own. Mrs. Tomiko looked down. Her reflection appeared faintly like a stranger returning after many years away. "I still can't see myself clearly," she whispered. The monk smiled. "That's because you're looking for the old one. The woman in the mirror is no longer the Tomiko from 10 years ago." His words cut gently into her deepest fear, the fear of losing herself. But as a breeze stirred and the light shimmered across the mirror's surface, she sensed something tender. Perhaps she hadn't lost herself at all. Perhaps an old part was simply giving way to something new, clearer, quieter, more real. She lowered her head. "Master, you're right. I'm no longer who I was. One of my eyes sees little now. My hands tremble. My body weakens. But what hurts most is feeling like no one needs me anymore." The monk remained silent. Sunlight filtered through the pines, casting a thread-like beam across the mirror. He pointed to it softly. "Do you see that light? It's still there no matter how dim the mirror becomes. The light never leaves. It's we who turn away from it." Her eyes filled with tears as he continued. "Impermanence isn't loss. It's light changing its form. You're not as you were before, but the light within you has never gone out. It no longer shines through youth or beauty. It shines through understanding and compassion." Tears rolled down her face, not of sorrow, but of realization. In that moment, she understood the light was never in the mirror. It was in the one who looked. And when she smiled, the mirror brightened, not because it was clean, but because the one looking had finally seen herself. In Zen, the mirror is more than a reflection. It's a metaphor for the knowing mind, the mind that sees clearly without clinging. A mirror does not choose or reject it, simply reflects. But when the human mind clings to the past, its clarity fades, unable to reflect the living present. The monk said gently, "When the mind attaches to the thought, 'who I used to be,' it's like trying to keep an old image fixed on the mirror. New light comes, but it cannot enter. If you want the mirror to shine, don't hold on to any image." Mrs. Tomiko asked softly, "But how can I let go of what used to be me?" The monk's eyes were kind yet deep. "No one asks you to throw it away. Just stop calling it me. Let the past be memory, don't turn it into identity." His words felt like a breeze sweeping through years of dust. She began to cry, not from weakness, but release. For so long she had guarded an old face the woman once loved, once strong, once young. Yet by clinging to her, she had forgotten the one who was still living now. As her tears fell, each drop seemed to wash away a layer of old dust. And in the softened reflection, she saw herself not as before, but as she truly was, fragile, honest, transparent, like a mirror cleaned for the first time in years. The monk led her to the lake behind the temple. Its surface was still mirroring the blue sky and drifting clouds. "Look," he said, "water isn't a mirror yet. It reflects better than any mirror because it doesn't try to." She gazed into the lake, seeing her reflection merge with the trees and sky. "How can my mind become like the water?" she asked, barely above a whisper. The monk smiled. "Do nothing. Just stop stirring." That single sentence carried the essence of meditation. When the mind stops struggling against fear, resentment, and comparison, it naturally becomes clear. Peace doesn't come from forcing calm, but from ceasing disturbance. A leaf fell, sending ripples across the water. Tomiko realized stillness doesn't mean holding things still. It means adding no more waves. And in that instant, both the lake and her heart reflected the same boundless sky. From that day on, every morning she sat quietly by the lake. She no longer brought her mirror. She simply watched the clouds drift. The water, once rippling, grew still like an invisible mirror. It no longer reflected her face, but revealed something deeper, the part of her that no longer sought, no longer resisted. Gradually, her face softened. The wrinkles seemed to rest along with her breath. Her remaining eyes shone not with youth, but with acceptance, the gentle light that comes only when the heart no longer wishes to be someone else. One morning, a young girl from the village passed by and asked grandmother, "Why don't you use your mirror anymore?" Tomiko smiled, her voice warm as morning sunlight. "Because an outer mirror only shows the form. The mirror of the mind shows the truth." "How do I look into the mirror of the mind?" the girl asked. Tomiko pointed to the lake where clouds and water merged into one. "When your mind is still, you'll see yourself clearer than in any mirror. Because only when there's nothing left to reflect can you truly see who you are." That is the essence of Zen. Mindfulness is the greatest mirror. One who lives mindfully doesn't need to search for their reflection elsewhere. They already see themselves in every breath, every breeze, every quiet ripple across the morning lake. In Buddhist teaching, the image of the mind as a clear mirror appears in the Avatamsaka Sutra. The mind is like a bright mirror reflecting all directions. The mirror makes no distinction. It simply reveals the true nature of things. When the mind stops analyzing and judging, everything reveals itself as it is, not through the lens of who I used to be or who I should be, but in its original clarity, beyond right or wrong, gain or loss. Mrs. Tomiko once looked into mirrors to see how her face had changed. Now she looked into her mind to see whether it was calm or disturbed. Whenever the lake water grew murky, she would smile and whisper, "Ah, my mind is stirring again." Then she'd sit quietly, breathing slowly until the water cleared, just as her mind did. No need to seek the Buddha far away. Zen is not found in lofty gestures, but in simple awareness, moments of pure seeing. When you look into your mirror mind each day, observing without judgment, seeing without attachment, you live Zen in daily life, where every breath reflects your true self. Every one of us carries an invisible mirror within. It reflects how we see the world and ourselves. Each time we get angry, criticize others, or condemn ourselves, a thin fog forms over that mirror. The more we dwell in resentment, the cloudier it becomes. We can no longer see others clearly, nor ourselves. Yet the miracle is this: the mirror never loses its light. It's only hidden beneath layers of the mind's mist to let the mirror shine again. We don't need to change others or escape life. We just need to stop, take a deep breath, exhale softly, and release the chatter in our heads. This is the meditation of polishing the mirror, simple, yet profoundly powerful. Each morning, sit for a few quiet minutes and ask, is my inner mirror clear today? If the answer is not yet, don't be sad. One mindful breath is enough to let the breeze of awareness blow the dust away. When the mind becomes clear again, the world softens too, for the world is only reflecting the mirror of our own mind. One evening, as the sun set behind the bamboo grove, the monk asked Mrs. Tomiko, "And now, how is your mirror?" She smiled peacefully. "I don't need it anymore, Master. I've learned how to see without looking." The monk nodded, his eyes warm with understanding. That, he said, is when the mirror is truly clear. As twilight descended, Mrs. Tomiko sat by the lake with her eyes closed. The water was still, no reflection, no shadow, yet her face glowed softly, illuminated by the light from within. She no longer needed eyes to see. She no longer needed a mirror to reflect. For that seeing no longer came from the eyes, it came from an awakened heart, where all forms dissolve into pure clarity. When the mind reaches that stillness, one no longer seeks light elsewhere, because then light is what you are shining both outward and inward, like a lake reflecting the sky, even when no ripples remain. Mrs. Tomiko's dim mirror is the image of all of us. We too have stood before the mirror of our lives, clinging to old images, identities, or reputations, calling them me. And when those change, we panic, believing we've lost ourselves. But in truth, we've only lost an illusion. The Buddha taught, all phenomena are without self. What you call I is merely a collection of changing conditions. When we understand this, we no longer need to search for our old reflection, nor prove who we are. The true self isn't found in beauty, youth, or status. It lives in mindful breaths, kind actions, and moments of freedom from attachment. Mrs. Tomiko never found her old face again, but she found her true one, the face of peace. It didn't come from an outer mirror, but from the quiet light within the light that appears only when we release every illusion of self. And then no mirror is needed anymore, because all of life itself becomes the clearest mirror of the awakened heart. That evening, as the monk walked past the lake, he stopped. The water was so still, it reflected both sky and earth as one. He smiled, knowing Mrs. Tomiko's mirror mind had truly become clear, not because it reflected something, but because nothing was left to reflect. From afar, the temple bell echoed, blending with the whisper of the wind through the pines, like the breath of the universe itself. Sunlight scattered across the lake into 1,000 bright shards, as if every fragment of light were smiling. Nothing was separate anymore. Everything reflected everything in perfect stillness. And in that stillness, the monk felt a quiet shift, not from the wind, but from the turning of karma itself. For when one story ends in light, another begins from silence. And somewhere beyond that mountain, Hakuin and Ichiro, two souls who had lost everything in the storm, were about to begin their new journey. The journey of learning to listen to themselves again. There are storms out there that tear off rooftops, but there are also storms within that can shake the entire direction of a person's life. The most frightening thing is not losing everything, but not knowing what remains to hold on to. Many people, when they lose a job, a relationship, or a familiar source of support, suddenly feel empty, as if their sense of worth has been swept away along with what they lost. But in the Buddha's teaching, it is precisely when everything collapses that one's true nature has the chance to emerge, like the moon revealed only after the clouds have cleared. Today's story tells of Hakuin and Ichiro, two craftsmen living in a small mountain village. One shaped clay, the other carved wood. Both lived by their hands and took pride in the craft that had filled their lives. Then one day, a great storm came. It erased their workshops, swept away their tools, and took everything they believed was essential to survival. Yet what the storm returned was not emptiness, but a profound lesson in impermanence, letting go. And humanity's greatest craft, the art of learning how to live. Because only when we lose everything do we begin to see what cannot be lost. That night the wind howled and tore through the village, carrying away roofs and years of peace. By morning, when the first light broke, the mountain village was nothing but a landscape of ruin, fallen trees, broken roofs, mud and debris everywhere. Ichiro's pottery workshop was reduced to rubble. Hundreds of half-fired pots lay shattered, glistening in the dawn like the earth's tears. Across the stream, Hakuin's woodshop was no better. The roof was gone, tools washed downstream, only a few soaked logs half buried in mud. Ichiro sat frozen, head in hands, his voice trembling. All those years of sweat, and now nothing. What's the point of living anymore? Hakuin was silent. He bent down and picked up a fragment of broken pottery. Sunlight struck it, making it gleam fragile, yet strangely beautiful. "Do you see?" he said softly. "Beauty still remains. It's just taken another form." Ichiro snapped. "Beauty? I've lost my craft, my customers, my reason to live." Hakuin looked at him for a long moment, then asked quietly, "Is it true you only live when you have a craft? If the craft is just a tool, who is the one holding it?" The question hung in the airlight, yet piercing enough to stir the ruins within. Hakuin's words were not a lofty philosophy. They were a needle through human pain, the fear of losing one's worth when nothing remains to cling to. Ichiro bowed his head, silent. The question echoed in him. "If I no longer make pottery, who am I?" Hakuin understood. Most people spend their whole lives tying I to what I do, what I own, what role I play. When those things vanish, they panic, believing they too have disappeared. But as the Buddha taught, what you cling to as self is not truly self. Occupation, status, fame. They are waves on the surface. When the wind dies, the water remains still and clear. The true self is never lost. It's merely hidden beneath the ripples of life. Hakuin did not try to comfort Ichiro with words. Instead, he quietly began to act. He gathered the broken pottery, washed away the mud, and arranged the pieces in a circle in the courtyard of an old temple destroyed by the storm. In the evening light, the shards sparkled like tiny stars. "Look closely," Hakuin said slowly. "This is the first work after the storm." Ichiro frowned. "A work? This is just trash." Hakuin smiled, voice deep as the wind. "What is trash if not something waiting to be seen with different eyes?" Ichiro fell silent. In the fading light, he looked again at the shards, and for the first time, they were no longer symbols of failure, but mirrors of his own reflection. As the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, the fragments glittered like countless small mirrors. Ichiro sat quietly. Memories returned his youth, his nimble hands, the joy in each spinning wheel, the heat of the kiln, the scent of warm earth. Back then, he worked for love, for the sheer joy of creation. But later, fear crept in, fear of losing customers, of falling behind, of his title, the best potter in the village, fading away. The storm outside was only a reflection of the storm that had long been raging within. Hakuin gazed into the distance, his voice soft as wind. The storm outside only clears away what isn't truly needed. But if you keep the storm inside, even a calm sky won't bring peace. Ichiro looked at the broken pottery and realized the storm had not only wrecked his house, but shattered the pride he had built around himself. That pride had once fueled him, but now it only exhausted him. He saw that what he had lost wasn't his craft, but the peace within it. Hakuin smiled gently. In Zen, they say, when all is lost, only the mind remains. When the mind is seen, nothing can be lost. Craftsmanship, whether in clay or wood, is a form of meditation. The hands work, but the mind must stay still. If your peace depends on success or failure, your craft becomes another chain. He picked up a damp shard and handed it to Ichiro. You think you lost your craft, but the craft never lost you. It's simply waiting for you to return to create, without attachment to shape, without owning. Ichiro gazed at Hakuin for a long while. The shards no longer looked like remnants of failure, but quiet reminders that from ruin, life can begin again when the hands are calm and the heart is clear. Every storm eventually passes, but what it leaves inside us is harder to rebuild. Houses can be razed, workshops restored, but rebuilding faith in oneself is the real journey. Hakuin once told Ichiro, to heal you don't need a new craft, only a new way of working. From that day, Ichiro began again, not through ambition, but through stillness. He gathered unbroken fragments, cleaned and dried them under the sun, then fired them once more. He no longer sought perfection. He simply wanted to witness earth fire and breath working together. And when the pieces fused into mosaics, rough yet strangely beautiful, it was as if life itself had learned to begin anew. Villagers came to see, calling it art from the storm. Ichiro only smiled. Not from the storm, from the silence after it. He finally understood that beauty doesn't come from form, but from the mind behind it. The Buddha once taught, the mindful person does not act for results. but because each breath in that act is part of the way. From then on, Ichiro worked like a Zen monk breathes not for praise or fear, but to live fully in the moment. And in that silence, he saw that the hands of a craftsman when free are the same hands as those of an awakened one. One morning, as dew clung to the grass, Hakuin and Ichiro sat by the stream. The breeze carried falling petals gently over clear water. The sound of the stream and the forest birds made the air so still that even breath seemed to slow. Hakuin looked at the flowing water and whispered, "Nothing can keep its old form forever. Impermanence doesn't come to take, it comes to teach us not to hold." Ichiro sat quietly reflecting on his past, the years he spent defending what he thought would last his craft, his name, his pride. He nodded softly. "I used to fear losing my craft. Now I see only by losing it did I truly understand what it was." Hakuin turned to him, eyes gentle as the stream. "So what will you do now?" Ichiro looked at his calloused hands and replied calmly, "I'll still make pottery, but not to sell. I'll make it the way you breathe for no purpose other than life itself." Hakuin smiled the smile of one who had heard something ripe with truth. He said, "That is when a craftsman becomes a monk. When you create without self-clay becomes dharma, and every breath is meditation." The stream flowed endlessly, holding on to nothing, just like the potter who had finally learned to live without clinging, and in that found peace. The following season, when the old temple was rebuilt, the courtyard displayed a sight that stopped travelers in their tracks. Dozens of pottery vessels, assembled from the broken shards of the storm, lined up beneath the morning sun. Each was unique, some crooked, some cracked, some leaning. Yet all glowed with a quiet radiance, as if each fracture breathed with the warmth of time and the human heart. Someone asked Hakuin, "Aren't you afraid people will laugh? These pots are so flawed, who could use them?" Hakuin smiled and ran his hand along one that shimmered gold in its cracks. "This world doesn't need more perfection. It needs things that have broken and still know how to shine." The listener fell silent. Sunlight poured through the cracks, scattering gentle rays across the ground. That is the spirit of Zen in daily life, seeing beauty in imperfection and recognizing Buddha within the fractures of the human heart. Because sometimes it's from the broken places that true light finds its way out. In modern psychology, they say, losing your job means losing your identity. People today often tie their worth to their work, their titles, or others' approval. But in Zen, losing your job isn't collapse. It's an invitation to peel away the mask and rediscover the pure creativity within. Zen teaches that every action is a vehicle for the mind. When the mind is clear, even simple acts, shaping clay, sweeping a floor, cooking a meal, become paths of awakening. But when the mind is clouded, even the highest positions bring suffering. The storm didn't destroy Ichiro. It simply returned him to where he needed to begin again, with bare hands and a humble heart. Like a meditator, disturbed by restless thoughts, only when the mind is shaken do we learn to sit still again. And only when we lose our way do we realize the path has been beneath our feet all along. So loss is not always tragedy. Sometimes it is life gently removing what no longer serves us so we can see ourselves clearly again, simple, bare, and radiant as we once were. If you are in a career storm, laid off, replaced, or forgotten, remember this: no one can truly take your worth. Life may simply be moving you toward a new apprenticeship, the craft of mastering your own mind. Instead of asking, "What do I still have?" try asking, "What can I create with a clearer heart?" When you stop resisting loss, a new space opens, and in that space, creativity begins to breathe. Because creative energy doesn't arise from fear, but from acceptance and presence. Ichiro, the potter who lost everything, no longer made pots to sell. He taught the village children how to shape clay, told them stories of storms, and how to listen to the earth as it dried in the sun. The children laughed and called him the monk of the earth, and perhaps in that moment Ichiro understood the true work of a human being is not to create things to keep, but to pass life forward through each breath, each hand, each grain of clay. The Buddha once said, "The wise are like the earth, they are not angered by what is thrown upon them, nor do they reject what is sown." Ichiro finally understood these words deeply. He no longer divided life into beauty and ugliness, gain and loss. In his hands, each broken shard became a living sutra, each flame in the kiln a dharma talk on cause and impermanence. Hakuin smiled and said, "The path of practice is not confined to temples. When the heart is at peace, any place becomes a hall of meditation." From then on, Ichiro sought neither profession nor fame. He worked in silence as if conversing with earth fire and his own breath. What once brought him pain, loss, failure, destruction, became the very materials through which he saw the Dharma in everyday life, and he realized his craft had never vanished. It had only changed shape to teach him the deeper lesson that every act done with clarity is a way home to oneself. One quiet afternoon, after finishing his final vessel, Ichiro sat watching it dry beneath the slanting temple light. At the bottom of the pot lay a small stone, the same one Hakuin had picked up from the road after the storm years ago. "Why did you place this stone here?" Master Ichiro asked. Hakuin replied gently, his voice like wind through pine, "To remind you that a pot may be empty, but it still needs a point of grounding. Just as a person, even after letting go of everything, still needs an unmoving heart." Ichiro looked at the stone and saw within its simplicity the essence of the way. Hakuin smiled. "When someone asks what your craft is, tell them you practice the art of keeping the heart still." Ichiro bowed, tears streaming down his face. He understood at last that every craft, pottery, woodwork, or sweeping the floor leads to one single art, the art of living awake. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, its golden light shimmered through the stone inside the pot, breathing with the rhythm of the earth itself. And somewhere along the mountain path where another stone lay waiting in silence, the next story began, the story of Haruto, a young man who stumbled upon what seemed an ordinary stone, only to discover in it the greatest lesson about obstacles, about the path, and about the mind itself. Sometimes what makes us stumble is not a great wall, but a small stone on the path. It's not heavy enough to stop us yet, just enough to make us fall. Not because of its strength, but because we refuse to look down. In life, we often blame misfortune, other people, or fate itself, but few ever stop to ask, could it be that I'm the one placing that stone in my own path? One spring morning, mist still lingered over the slopes of the mountain. The path leading up to the Zen monastery was slick with dew and silence. Haruto, a young novice newly arrived to study the way, carried 2 buckets of water balanced across his shoulders, stepping carefully up a narrow incline. Halfway up, a stone lay still in the middle of the path. Each day Haruto tripped over it, and each time he frowned and muttered, "Why hasn't anyone moved this? So many monks in the temple, can't anyone see this stone?" Days passed. The complaint repeated, and the stone remained as if testing who would be the first to bow. Haruto didn't yet know that every stone in life lies exactly where it belongs, not to block, but to reflect. And from this seemingly meaningless stone, a profound lesson was about to unfold, a lesson in awareness, responsibility, and seeing oneself, one Haruto would never forget. The next morning, as dawn broke and mist still veiled the trail, Haruto once again carried water up the slope. When he reached the familiar bend, his foot struck the same stone hard. The buckets tipped, spilling water all over the ground, mixing with mud into dark streaks. Furious, Haruto threw the buckets down and shouted, "Again! Why won't anyone move it? Everyone walks this way. How can no one notice?" He looked around, hoping to find someone to blame, but there was only the sound of soft wind and a distant temple bell. At the far end of the path, the abbot, thin, wearing simple brown robes, was walking slowly toward him. He looked at Haruto with eyes calm as a still lake. "Who are you angry at, Haruto?" the master asked gently. Haruto bowed his head, still brimming with frustration. "Master, I keep tripping over this same stone every day. No one moves it. I'm so tired." The abbot smiled softly, as if hearing a child's story. "Then why don't you move it?" Haruto froze. "Me, but I thought that wasn't my job," the master asked, voice low and steady. "When you trip, who feels the pain?" Silence. The abbot bent down, used his walking stick to nudge the stone to the side of the path, and said, "The stone isn't at fault, Haruto. It simply lies where it is. When you don't see it, you stumble. When you see it but still ignore it, you stumble again, and your life will be the same, tripping over the same spot again and again, because you always think the fault lies elsewhere." Haruto bowed deeply. Amid the echo of the distant bell, he felt something within him tremble like water just beginning to settle. For the first time, he realized the stone was not on the path, it was in his mind. The master's words rang like a bell through the silence, reverberating through Haruto's hidden thoughts. He looked down at the small stone, something so trivial, yet capable of stirring so much anger. He felt almost amused by himself. A lifeless thing lying quietly had stolen his peace for days. The abbot stepped closer, voice soft as morning mist. In Zen, we don't remove obstacles to make the path smooth. We remove them to learn how to bow. Only when you bow can you truly see yourself. Haruto bent down, picked up the stone with muddy hands, and set it gently on the grassy edge. A simple act, yet in that instant his heart felt lighter, as if washed clean. No more irritation, no more blame, only a quiet clarity within. The master smiled kindly. You see, when you change the way you look, you not only clear the path for yourself, but also for those who come after. Haruto nodded, then hesitated. But master, why did such a small stone make me so angry? It never did anything to me. The abbot looked at him and replied slowly, That's right, Haruto. The stone did nothing. It merely reflected the part of your mind that's still untrained, the part that wants everything to go your way. When you see that clearly, the stone stops being an obstacle. It becomes your teacher. Haruto bowed again. As he placed the stone aside, something within him also settled. He saw that there were many other stones in his mind, invisible, yet heavier than this small pebble. One was pride, making him angry at the slightest word or glance. Another was the habit of blame, always looking for someone else to be responsible. And the deepest stone, arrogance, believing small things were beneath him. He realized the road of life isn't hard because of fate, but because of the stones we pile in our own hearts. The abbot looked at him, his voice gentle yet resonant, like a temple bell. No stone can truly block the step of an awakened one. Only the mind builds its own walls from thought. He pointed to the cleared spot where sunlight now streamed. See, the path hasn't changed, only your way of seeing it. And that is Zen, fixing the road by fixing the mind. Haruto watched sunlight flicker on the ground. For the first time, he smiled light, as if a stone had been lifted from within. In the Buddha's teaching, every difficulty is a Dharma gate, not to be avoided, but to be looked into deeply. When practitioners face hardship, they do not ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" Just like Haruto's little stone, if we see only pain, we learn resentment. But if we pause to see its cause, wisdom begins. Haruto realized that the stone was never there to block him, but to awaken attention that had fallen asleep. It made him see himself the one rushing to blame instead of observe. In life, those who irritate us, disappoint us, or frighten us, they are all stones of the mind, reflecting the parts of us still clinging and unawake. If we only resent, suffering repeats. If we observe, each stumble becomes an awakening. The Buddha once said, "There is no path to enlightenment that does not pass over the stones of suffering." Suffering is not the enemy. It is the most honest teacher, showing us our ego, teaching us to bow and to let go. Looking back, Haruto felt an unexpected gratitude. He realized it was the stones he had tripped over that taught him to walk mindfully, step by step, light, steady, and clear. If in your own life you meet a stone, a person who hurts you, a situation that frustrates you, a failure that repeats, don't rush to blame or avoid it. Pause, take a deep breath, and gently ask, what is this stone trying to teach me? Sometimes the stone doesn't come to hurt you, but to awaken what you refuse to see. It slows you down, forces you to shift perspective, and reminds you that the path isn't only under your feet, it's within your mind. If you're calm enough to observe, you'll see not every stone needs to be removed. Some must be picked up like bad habits or resentment. Some should be kept as reminders of past lessons of limits and gratitude. And some don't need to be touched at all for when the heart is still. Even a rough road feels smooth. What matters is not making the path flatter, but making the heart wider. For the peaceful heart, even walking on stones, can hear the flowers bloom beneath its feet. One evening, as Haruto swept the courtyard under moonlight, the abbot passed by and asked Haruto, "What do you think of that stone now?" Haruto paused, smiling softly. "I feel grateful for it, Master. Without it, I wouldn't have known how easily I get angry." The Master nodded, eyes warm, as if seeing through the night air. That is how karma transforms from anger to clarity. When you see the root of suffering, anger dissolves. And when anger dissolves, compassion is born. The words fell into Haruto's heart like dew onto a still lake, quiet yet deep. He understood compassion doesn't come from pity, but from understanding suffering, one's own and others. Those who have stumbled don't laugh when others fall because they know how it feels. And from that understanding, true compassion arises. The Master looked at Haruto once more and said softly, "When life's road tires, you don't rush to find another path. Sometimes you don't need a new road, only new eyes to see the old one." Haruto bowed and smiled. The moon rose higher, and the path beneath his feet seemed brighter than ever. Weeks later at dawn, Haruto saw a new novice carrying water up the same trail. The boy tripped right where the stone once lay. Haruto rushed over, helped him up, and smiled kindly. "Careful there. There used to be a stone here." The novice looked around, puzzled. "But I don't see any stone," Haruto replied softly. "That's because someone already moved it." In that moment, Haruto understood the abbot's words deeply. Each time you remove a stone from your heart, the world loses one from its path. He realized that practice is never just personal. It's how one clear mind lights the way for others. One person who learns not to react saves many from the cycle of resentment. One who listens in silence teaches peace to the world around them. Haruto looked at the path glowing under the morning sun. And in that light he saw clearly, when one heart grows lighter, the whole world softens. In Buddhist psychology, suffering doesn't arise from events themselves, but from our reactions to them. The stone is only a stone, lifeless, intentionless. But the moment we think, "Why is it here? Who put it there?" I suffer. Because of it, a storm begins in the mind. Zen teaches, see things just as they are. When you see the stone simply as a stone, your mind is clear as a still pond. When you see it as a problem, your mind stirs, and from that movement, Storms are born. An agitated mind creates storms. A still mind lets them dissolve like clouds after rain. Each day, we walk past hundreds of stones in work, in family, in relationships, and within ourselves. Some are so small, we don't notice yet they weigh down every step. The problem is never the stone, it's how we walk. So learn to walk slower. Look down at your path not in fear of falling, but in gratitude for each step. When obstacles appear, don't curse life's unfairness. See them as gentle invitations to pause and listen within, because sometimes that little stone is the universe whispering, "Slow down. You're walking too fast and forgetting to see yourself." From then on, every morning, Haruto still walked the same road to the temple, yet he no longer feared tripping, not because the path had changed, but because his mind had. Each step now felt light as breath, as if even the dust beneath his feet were smiling. Once the abbot said, "The wise don't avoid stones. They learn to step over them, and sometimes they even place them by the roadside just to watch the light fall on them." Haruto understood then. The stone was no longer an obstacle, but a companion on the path of awakening. He remembered the Buddha's words. The enlightened one does not seek to change the world, but to change the way of seeing. When the mind is peaceful, the world is peaceful. When the mind is restless, the world shakes. The world around us is only a mirror of the one within. So every stone we meet, misunderstanding, failure, or pain, can become light if we look with a calm heart. That day, Haruto simply smiled, picked up a few small stones along the path, and arranged them neatly by the grass. He knew the road ahead was still long, but he needed to carry nothing, only a still heart. That evening, as the last rays of sunlight fell across the temple roof, Haruto quietly swept leaves in the courtyard. The broom's sound was soft as breath. The abbot passed by, paused, and looked at him with eyes deep as morning water. He smiled and said, "You see, the stone is no longer on the road, but if you keep it in your heart, it will be as heavy as before." Haruto looked up, voice calm. "I understand now, Master. The path doesn't need to be cleared of every stone. Just clearing one at a time in my heart already makes my steps light." The Master nodded slowly. That is when true silence begins, the silence not of absence of sound, but of a heart no longer arguing with life. The wind passed, carrying the last leaves gently to the ground, as if they too understood. The temple bell rang long and low, its sound drifting across distant hills into stillness. And within that echo, a new chapter quietly began, the story of two Zen masters, Mugaku and Kazan, who would one day explore the art of noble silence, where words fall away and silence itself becomes the voice of wisdom. Have you ever noticed that the more we try to explain something, the further we drift from its true essence? Like a still pond, the more it's stirred, the less it can reflect the clear blue sky. Zen teaches that some things can only be heard in silence, not with the ears, but with a quiet mind. But how can we understand silence without turning it into coldness? How can we speak without words, yet let others feel the compassion within us? The answer doesn't lie in language, but in the quality of our presence. When the mind no longer argues or tries to prove itself, presence naturally radiates like warmth, wordless yet deeply touching. The story of the two Zen masters, Mugaku and Kazan, reveals the power of awakened silence, a silence not meant to avoid or to appear detached, but the silence of wisdom that knows when to speak and when to be still. For sometimes, only when the world stops making noise can we finally hear the deepest sound, the voice of our own heart. It was an autumn afternoon. Golden leaves covered the path leading to the Zen monastery. A cool mountain breeze stirred the wind chimes by the veranda, their soft notes echoing like the breath of the earth. Inside the meditation hall, incense smoke drifted lazily. Kazan, a young novice, knelt before his teacher. Mugaku, a master renowned for his serenity and wisdom, as deep as an autumn lake. Bowing low, Kazan spoke with a heavy voice. Master, someone has insulted me. If I stay silent, they call me weak. If I speak, they say I'm angry. What should I do to stay true to the way? Mugaku smiled, his gaze gentle yet clear, piercing through the mist outside the veranda. He spoke slowly. You see, my son, when the mind is not yet still, both speech and silence are only echoes of the ego. One speaks to defend the self. One can also be silent to protect the self. Neither is truly peaceful. Kazan looked up confused. Outside, a golden leaf fell spun once and came to rest on the stone steps. The master continued. When the mind is clear like a still pond, even the wind only stirs ripples of light. Then you can speak and still be silent, or remain silent and still be speaking through wisdom. The autumn breeze swept across the veranda, carrying the faint scent of incense. In that brief moment, Kazan felt something stir deep within a silence that words could never express. And that was the beginning of his greatest lesson, to understand the silence that no longer belonged to the ego, but to awakened wisdom itself. The next morning, when mist still covered the temple roofs, Mugaku led Kazan up the mountain behind the monastery. They walked in silence. The bamboo leaves rustled softly like whispers of the wind. No one spoke. The winding path climbed higher, clouds drifting below their feet. Each step brought Kazan closer to something he couldn't yet name. At the summit, Mugaku stopped before a large stone. He sat down, cross-legged, eyes closed posture, serene against the wind. Kazan stood beside him, uneasy. Master, he asked, why have we come up here? Mugaku didn't answer immediately. He raised a hand and pointed to the drifting clouds. Look at those clouds, Kazan. Do they argue with the wind? Kazan replied softly, No, master. They simply move with it. Mugaku nodded, a faint smile under his silver beard. Exactly. The clouds never need to prove what they are. The true practitioner is the same. There is no need to prove you are right, only to keep your heart from being carried away by the wind. Kazan stayed quiet for a long time, then asked, But master, if someone insults the Dharma, should I remain silent? Mugaku opened his eyes, their depth reflecting the young monk's restless heart. If you are silent out of fear, that is cowardice. If you speak out of pride, that is anger. But if you remain silent, because you see all words falling into emptiness, that is wisdom. His words rang through the wind between the cliffs. Kazan bowed, eyes wet with tears. In the cold mountain air, a single drop fell to the stone, like a dewdrop dissolving into still water, leaving behind a ripple of light. Mugaku said nothing more. He picked up a fallen golden leaf, placed it gently in Kazan's hand, and asked, "Tell me, what does this leaf say?" Kazan listened for a long moment, then whispered, "It is silent, master." Mugaku smiled softly. "But do you hear its silence? It is the sound of letting go when the leaf releases the branch. The earth accepts the fall, and the wind carries it into a new journey. That is harmony, not the end of sound, but the end of resistance." A gust of wind swept through the pass, lifting the leaf from Kazan's hand. It spiraled upward and vanished into the clouds. And in that instant, Kazan heard what words could never reach. For the first time, he understood silence isn't the absence of speech, but the absence of anything left to defend. Nothing to prove, nothing to compare, nothing to justify. It is the silence of a mind that has seen through illusion, knowing that every argument is but an echo in the cave of the self. Amid the vast wind, Kazan felt his heart like the leaf finally learning how to fall in peace. In life, we often confuse two kinds of silence. One is silence out of fear, the shrinking silence that hides, afraid to lose, to be misunderstood, to be hurt. The other is silence out of clarity, when one sees that everything is already enough, needing no victory, no proof, no more words. The Buddha once said, "When words bring no benefit, be silent as one who has realized the way." The wise do not speak to win, they speak to illuminate. And when truth reveals itself, words become unnecessary. Such silence is not avoidance, but compassion, for we refuse to stir another ripple in another's mind. In Buddhist psychology, this is called wordless awareness, a state where the mind simply witnesses without reacting, like a still lake, reflecting clouds, but holding on to none. This is the silence of wisdom, born not from fear, but from understanding. When the mind reaches such stillness, it is no longer pulled by the noise of the world. Every statement, right or wrong, is only the echo of a river, unaware it is flowing. As they descended the mountain, the sound of a stream murmured nearby, mingling with the rustling bamboo. Kazan listened and asked, "Master, does the stream ever stop flowing?" Mugaku smiled. "No, it flows all its life." "Then why," Kazan asked, "do I only hear it sometimes?" The master replied gently, "Because when your mind is still, you hear it. When your mind is restless, you don't." Silence doesn't belong to the stream. It belongs to the listener. The master's words soaked into Kazan's heart like rain into dry earth. He realized true silence isn't when the world stops making sound, but when the mind stops choosing. When there's no longer someone wanting or not wanting to hear, every sound becomes transparent like water flowing through life. Neither noisy nor quiet, simply flowing. And in that moment, Kazan understood silence is not a state of the world. It is a quality of an awakened mind. In life, there are times when we must speak up for what is right. But the voice of a meditator differs from the voice of the world. It doesn't arise from reaction, but from mindfulness and compassion. When misunderstood or attacked, ordinary people rush to defend themselves. But a practitioner first takes a deep breath before speaking, for they know that silence is not weakness nor submission, but the choice of peace over victory. Just as the moon never argues with the night to prove it shines, it simply glows, and darkness fades on its own. Truth is the same. It doesn't need defense through words, but through the clarity of those who live it. If you can remain silent while filled with understanding and kindness, your silence is no longer endurance. It becomes the language of the Buddha's heart, a language without sound, yet one that lets others feel peace. At that stage, both speech and silence serve wisdom, for in both the mind is unmoved by life's storms. In the middle-length discourses, someone once asked the Buddha, "Do you stay silent when insulted?" He replied, "When the mind is undisturbed, words are unnecessary." The Buddha was not silent out of fear or tolerance. He was silent because he saw that the other was speaking to their own illusion. And with illusion, there is nothing to argue, only compassion deep enough to smile. The enlightened don't strive to prove, for they know truth needs no defense, only to be lived. In Zen, silence is not the absence of response, but the deepest form of response, one that adds no noise to another's storm. When you stay silent with clarity, the other begins to hear the echo of their own mind. And sometimes, that echo becomes the clearest mirror where anger, fear, and delusion reveal themselves and fade. When the mind is unmoved, no word can disturb it. And that is the power of enlightened silence. Years later, after Master Mugaku passed away, Kazan became the abbot of the temple. One quiet afternoon, as rain gently fell, a visitor asked Master, "When I am wrongly criticized, what should I do not to suffer?" Kazan stayed silent for a moment. His gaze turned to the veranda where raindrops fell upon bamboo leaves. He said softly, "Listen." The visitor looked puzzled. "Listen to what, Master?" Kazan smiled. "Listen to the rain without asking why it falls." Then he spoke again, slowly, like the rhythm of the rain itself. "Those who criticize you are like this rain. If your heart is the earth, you will be eroded. If your heart is a pond, you will reflect. But if your heart is the sky, you will embrace it all." The visitor fell silent. Outside, the rain kept falling, but within something had quietly settled. They realized true strength doesn't come from reaction, but from keeping a heart as vast as the sky, where every drop of rain becomes only the breath of nature. That is the power of enlightened silence, quiet, yet radiant, still yet profound, needing no explanation, yet bringing peace to all who touch it. Ordinary people often fear silence, not because silence is frightening, but because they can't bear the sound of their own minds. When the outer noise fades, the inner noise begins: worry, regret, anger, craving. So they rush to play music, to talk, to stay busy, just to avoid hearing themselves. But practitioners seek silence not to escape, but to listen to the mind that has never truly been disturbed. For each time we stop speaking, reacting and judging, we hear the pure echo of awareness, that bright essence untouched by thought. That's why in many Zen monasteries, masters teach not through words, but through presence. Just by sitting beside one whose heart is truly still, we too begin to quiet down. For stillness spreads more powerfully than words. It doesn't persuade or explain. It simply is. And when we're calm enough to feel it, every sound in the world becomes a bell of Zen. Today, the world is noisier than ever. Phone alerts, news feeds, endless arguments and opinions, all swirling like an unceasing wind around the mind. If you have no inner place to return to, you'll be swept away without realizing it. But that refuge isn't far, it's within your very breath. Just pause, inhale deeply, exhale slowly, and you'll find a stillness no noise can touch. When someone's words wound, you don't rush to respond. Look at them gently with compassion. Perhaps they are only speaking from a wound unhealed. If you stay silent with understanding, you are not weak, you are dissolving karma in that very moment. Each time you choose not to react, the world softens a little. One peaceful heart can calm an entire space. That is meditation in daily life, where breath, compassion, and silence meet, allowing both the world within and around you to rest. In his later years, Kazan often sat quietly under the temple eaves, watching flower petals drift in the evening breeze. A disciple once asked Master, "When you see the petals fall, what do you think of?" Kazan smiled gently. "Nothing. I'm just listening to the sound of flowers falling." That simple answer contained the essence of Zen. When the mind is truly still, every sound, a falling leaf, a gust of wind, a drop of rain becomes a Dharma teaching, for none are colored by thought or judgment. Silence at its deepest is not the end of dialogue, but the beginning of wisdom. It is when we stop speaking to be understood and begin listening with the heart. In that moment, the world seems to hold its breath. The mind becomes clear, like a lake after rain, reflecting everything, holding on to nothing. And from that stillness, the light of compassion, not from the eyes, but from the tranquil heart, begins to shine gently like the first dawn over the mountains. Have you ever wondered? Seeing is not always understanding, and understanding is not always seeing. The eyes may be wide open, yet the mind remains closed. In Buddhism, this is called seeing with blind eyes, for we do not truly see the world as it is, but only through layers of prejudice, memory, and desire. The following story is about Ryuko, a colorblind painter, yet the only one in his village who could paint light without seeing color. It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? But within that paradox lies the path from seeing with the eyes to perceiving with the heart. One early summer morning, the sky was so clear that even the distant mountains seemed to draw closer. In a small mountain village, Ryuko sat before his worn-out easel, his hands slowly mixing shades of light and dark, guided not by sight, but by feeling. Villagers often said, "He paints with his heart, not with color." His paintings brought a strange peace to all who gazed at them, as if every stroke carried the breath of wind, the calm of clouds, and the stillness of the earth. One day, a visitor came to Ryuko's studio. Looking around skeptically, he asked, "If you can't see color, how do you know your paintings are beautiful?" Ryuko smiled, his gaze calm like a quiet lake. "I don't need to see color to know light," he said gently. "I only need to feel it." The man laughed, thinking it was just an excuse for his disability. But Ryuko wasn't talking about art, he was talking about life. For there are things like light itself that cannot be seen, only felt. And when the heart is luminous, every shadow becomes a shade of wisdom. Years ago, as a young painter, Ryuko suffered deeply from his color blindness. Every time he saw others marvel at a rainbow, he thought, "Why do they get to see the world in color while I see only gray?" That question haunted him for years, filling him with shame and resentment. One day in despair, he sought Master Mugaku, an old hermit known for teaching people to see with the heart. Through tears, Ryuko asked Master, "If my eyes cannot see, how can I live in a world full of color?" The master didn't answer. He simply smiled and pointed to a white flower on the wooden table. "Do you smell its fragrance?" Ryuko nodded. "Yes." "Then do you see it?" "No, master, but I can feel it." Mugaku smiled softly. "That's enough. You don't need eyes to see, only a mind not deceived by color." From that day, Ryuko began painting through awareness instead of sight. He used earth, water, leaves, ash, even morning sunlight, feeling their texture, warmth, and rhythm. His paintings were not bright like rainbows, but they radiated a quiet, living light, the breath of the earth itself. Those who looked at them did not just see, they heard. The whisper of the wind, the pulse of life, and the stillness behind every brushstroke. Once, a disciple asked the Buddha, "Blessed One, why do I see the world so clearly, yet my mind remains clouded?" The Buddha smiled, "Because you see through the eyes of the past, not through the pure awareness of the present." That teaching was exactly what Ryuko, the colorblind painter, lived without knowing. Unable to rely on his eyes, he was forced to perceive reality directly without judgment, memory, or comparison. He once said, "Those with sight only see what they think is beautiful. But because I cannot see color, I notice what others ignore. The light within shadow, the tenderness within the ordinary." One evening, just before sunset, a young monk visited Ryuko's studio. He stood quietly before a monochrome painting and asked, "Moved, master, your paintings have no color yet. I feel as if they shine with light." "Why?" Ryuko smiled kindly. His eyes reflected a depth beyond form or shade. "Light," he said, slowly, "doesn't live in color, it lives in the gaze unclouded." The monk bowed, understanding. Some light doesn't shine from outside, but radiates from a heart that has learned to see without looking. In Buddhist teaching, looking and seeing are not the same. Looking is an act of the eyes, Seeing is an awareness of the heart untouched by bias or emotion. A person may look upon the whole world and still never see themselves, but one whose eyes are closed and mind is still may see the unseen truth in each breath. When the mind is veiled by greed, anger, and delusion, we see only what we wish to see, and the world bends with our moods. But when the mind is steady and undisturbed by gain or loss, reality reveals itself exactly as it is. The Buddha taught, "Those who see with the eyes perceive form. Those who see with wisdom perceive impermanence." Ryuko, the colorblind painter, was one who saw with such wisdom. In each of his brushstrokes, impermanence was alive. No form remained fixed. No shade stayed the same. The light in his paintings shifted with the breath of nature, like time itself flowing quietly on. Viewers didn't just see his art, they felt life breathing through it. Beauty was no longer in color, but in the awareness of change. One day a young man came to Ryuko eager to learn. He brought bags of bright paints and asked Master, "What is the secret to painting something truly beautiful?" Ryuko smiled and led him outside where morning mist covered the distant hills. "Paint this scene," he said. The student frowned. "But Master, I can't see clearly. Everything looks blurry." Ryuko nodded. "That's reality. The world was never as clear as you think. Only when you stop trying to make it clear will you begin to see the light hidden in the mist." The student didn't fully understand, but as he began painting, he noticed the subtle movements, light-shifting, wind-breathing shades blending beyond names. Ryuko said softly, "A painter, like a person who demands clarity in everything, will miss the beauty in what is changing." That truth applies to us all. We crave certainty, who's right, who's wrong, who loves, who hates. But truth often hides in the fog of not knowing. Only a mind unafraid of uncertainty can see the light of reality. The Buddha taught, "From ignorance wisdom arises. From darkness light appears." If Ryuko had never lived in colorless sight, he might never have learned to see with awakened awareness, vision beyond the eyes. Adversity, after all, is where the Dharma hides. Only in darkness can we see the stars. In life, when you feel lost, directionless, confused, unsure of where you're going, don't curse the fog. For it is when you have no map that you start to truly notice each step. That is the beginning of mindfulness, seeing reality as it is unfiltered by old beliefs. You don't need to be colorblind like Ryuko, but you do need eyes that know how to pause. When angry with someone, try closing your eyes. Don't see them through past memories, through old hurts or wounded pride. See them as they are in this moment. They too are suffering just like you. And in seeing that anger dissolves, when admiring a beautiful scene, ask yourself, am I seeing the scene, or is it reflecting my mind? If the mind is restless, every landscape looks unclear. If the mind is still, the whole world becomes transparent. That is the art of Zen, living, not changing the world nor escaping it, but cleansing the eyes of the heart. When the eye of the heart is clear, you not only see the world more clearly, you see yourself in every breath of life. One evening, someone asked Ryuko, "Master, do you ever feel sad for not seeing color?" He smiled softly. "No, because if I could see, I might choose. And if I choose, I would miss the whole." That simple answer captured the essence of non-attachment. When the mind doesn't choose, cling, or judge what's beautiful or ugly, all forms and colors become the living body of truth itself. Each of us paints a canvas of our own karma and choices. But if we fear mistakes and control every stroke, the picture becomes rigid and distorted. Only when we let the hand relax and trust the natural flow of life can the painting harmonize on its own. Modern psychology echoes this. We don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. The Buddha taught the same 2,500 years ago. The mind is a mirror. If stained by fear, desire, or pain, every reflection is distorted. Ryuko, freed from reliance on his sight, had unconsciously polished that mirror clean. He did not seek color with the eyes, but light with the heart. And so, when people looked at his paintings, they sensed something unusual, not just landscapes, but their own stillness reflected back at them. That is the power of a colorless painting, where light doesn't come from the canvas, but from within the viewer's awakened heart. The Buddha said in the Samyutta Nikaya, "He who sees impermanence sees the Dharma. He who sees the Dharma sees me." Ryuko could not see color, but he saw impermanence within light. He often said, "Each evening the sunlight changes its tone. No color is real. No emotion truly ours forever." For him, light was life, ever-changing, never still. And within that change, truth was revealed. When you learn to see as it is adding nothing, removing nothing, judging nothing, you begin to see with the eyes of Zen. Eyes unclouded by opinions, memory, or fear. Everything then becomes whole, needing no perfection, no control. That is the seeing of one who has stopped grasping, a seeing that rests peacefully in each moment of change. When the mind is still, you no longer need to seek impermanence, for it reveals itself in every breath, every ray of sunlight, every falling flower. In his later years, someone asked Ryuko, "If in your next life you could see color, would you paint differently?" He smiled gently, voice soft as wind. "No, because I have already seen true color, the color within the light of the heart." His answer left everyone silent, for they knew some things can only be seen by eyes washed clean through meditation and insight. Ryuko needed no vision to recognize beauty. He saw with a heart that had merged with stillness. That evening, the sun sank behind the mountains. Golden light spread across the earth, mingling with the breath of the wind. A soft breeze passed by, carrying the faint sound of temple bells. The sound was not just a farewell, but a gentle invitation to the next journey. And from within that bell's echo, another story quietly began, the story of Sangai and Tenshin. Two young disciples living among the bamboo forest who would one day discover the strength within softness, learning how to bend with the storm. without breaking, like bamboo that endures the wind, because it understands that true steadfastness is born from the grace of yielding. In life, everyone wants to be strong. But have you ever wondered, where does true strength really lie? In hardness, or in the ability to be soft and flexible? A rock may be solid, yet over time, rainwater can still wear it down. While the bamboo, fragile as it seems, knows how to bend before the storm, and so it stands tall again when the wind has passed. The Buddha once taught, "The one who is gentle is the one whose heart cannot be broken." Because gentleness is not weakness, it is the wisdom to flow with impermanence, to know when to yield so as not to break. This story is about two disciples, Sangai and Tenshin. One believed that unwavering firmness was true wisdom. The other believed that only by bowing down could one touch true peace. Between them began a journey to discover the truth that sometimes what endures is not what resists falling, but what knows how to bend in the wind. One late autumn afternoon, in a small Zen monastery on the mountainside, Sangai was sweeping the courtyard. The sky was dim, clouds heavy, and the wind began to rise. From the bamboo grove behind the temple, gusts howled through the stalks, bending them low, swirling fallen leaves into small spirals of impermanence. Each leaf that touched the ground was swept up again by the wind, as if dancing to the song of time. Tenshin, his fellow monk, walked by and smiled softly. "Do you hear them? The bamboo are singing with the wind." Sangai stopped, frowned. "I hear no song. They are being subdued. If they were pines, they would stand firm, without bowing to the wind." Tenshin looked at him and replied gently, "But the bamboo do not break." That simple sentence fell like a grain of dust onto the still surface of Sangai's mind. From that day on, he never swept absent-mindedly again. Each time the wind blew, he listened to the rustling bamboo and wondered, could the softness Tenshin spoke of be another form of strength? Or was it simply how the weak comforted themselves in the face of storms? The wind kept passing through the grove. The leaves kept whispering. And in those whispers, Sangai began to realize perhaps true strength does not lie in rigidity, but in the ability to bend without losing oneself. That night, rain poured down in torrents. Thunder split the sky. Wind roared through the bamboo forest behind the monastery like the pounding drums of an angry earth. Sangai lay awake, restless. In the flashes of lightning, he saw the bamboo bent so low they seemed about to snap. Anger rose in him that was not resilience, but cowardice. Unable to bear it, Sangai threw on his rain cloak, grabbed a lantern, and stepped out into the storm. Tenshin rushed after him, shouting, "Are you mad? The wind will tear you apart." Sangai shouted back, his voice lost in the gale, "I want to see if they can still stand." The two struggled into the rain. The wind whipped their faces. The rain lashed down like whips. Before them, the bamboo grove swayed violently, stalks clattering like swords breaking in battle. Sangai grabbed one bamboo stalk, trying to force it upright. Within moments, his hands burned, his body pushed sideways by the gusts. A stronger wind hit, knocking him into the mud. Tenshin ran to lift him up and said quietly through the storm, "Do you see the bamboo does not resist its bows?" Sangai gasped for breath and looked around. The grove was bowed under the storm, yet none were broken. Amid the chaos, he heard a deeper rhythm, low, calm, peaceful. It was not a cry of fear or weakness, but a song of surrender. wordless, effortless, alive. And for the first time, Sangai understood, there is strength that appears only when we are willing to bow. The next morning, the sky cleared after the storm. Sunlight streamed through the bamboo leaves, illuminating droplets of dew like thousands of tiny pearls breathing in silence. The grove stood serene, untouched, as if no storm had ever passed. Sangai watched in awe and murmured, "Strange." They did not resist, yet they survived. Tenshin smiled, his voice calm like the wind, because they never tried to win. Bamboo knows wind is just wind, a storm is just a storm. When the wind passes, it straightens again. People suffer because they keep trying to win, even against what never needed to be won. The words echoed in Sangai's heart, like a temple bell. He had been taught since childhood to be firm, unyielding, never bow. But now, standing among the dew-covered bamboo, he realized even firmness can be a form of attachment. When the heart is too rigid, the first thing to break is the heart itself. True strength lies not in standing tall against the storm, but in knowing how to bow and not break. And in that moment, Sangai understood what he had only heard from his master before, that sometimes softness is the deepest form of wisdom. In Buddhist teaching, two words are often misunderstood: patience and letting go. People think patience means to grit one's teeth, and letting go means giving up. But in truth, patience means keeping the mind undisturbed amid life's waves, and letting go means not letting the ego interfere in every reaction. A practitioner does not let go out of fear, but because they clearly see what is worth holding and what must be released. Like bamboo in the storm, it does not resist the wind, nor does it surrender to it. It simply returns to its nature, bending when the wind is strong and standing tall when the wind is calm. When the storm passes, it remains whole. The Buddha once said, "The wise bend with the current, yet their hearts do not flow with it." Softness is the strength of one who has mastered the ego. Rigidity, by contrast, is often the reaction of one who has not yet understood impermanence. In life, there are two kinds of storms, outer and inner. Outer storms are events, loss, betrayal, misunderstanding. Inner storms are the tempests of the heart, when we cannot accept what is, when we want to prove to win, to be seen to be right. When someone hurts us, our first instinct is to fight back. When we fail, we want to rise to prove ourselves. When we are misunderstood, we want to explain. These are the inner storms, but a meditator understands not every storm must be fought. If we can be still like the bamboo grove, knowing when to bend and when to rise, then outer storms cannot knock us down, and inner storms cannot steal our peace. That is the art of the awakened life, not trying to change the wind, but learning to bend without losing one's root. Whenever life becomes turbulent, remember the bamboo in the storm. Do not strain against everything with argument or pride. Do not think you must always be right, always be acknowledged, always appear stronger than others. Take a breath, step back, look inward. If the wind rises, let it pass. If someone speaks in anger, let them finish. For the silence of mindfulness is stronger than any reaction. When you are no longer caught in the whirl of conflict, your mind becomes like a lake after rain, clear, still reflecting the sky. Letting go is not weakness. It is knowing you no longer need to hold on. Like bamboo, though it bows its roots run deep, it softens to live, not stiffens to break. In this ever-changing world, true strength is not in always standing tall, but in bowing without losing your roots, in being still yet unshaken, the virtue of the wise, the soul of the awakened. The Buddha once compared the practitioner to water, which takes no fixed shape, yet can embrace every form. When it falls, it becomes a stream. When it meets cold, it turns to ice. When it meets heat, it becomes vapor. In every form, its nature remains clear, soft, and natural. So too, with the meditative mind, it adapts to circumstances without losing awareness. It flows through life without losing stillness within. That is wisdom in motion meditation, amid life itself. After that stormy night, Sangai began to change. He no longer sought to be right, no longer tried to tell others how to live. Instead, he listened more, reacted less, and viewed everything through the light of understanding rather than judgment. One morning, Tenshin asked, "Are you still angry at the bamboo?" Sangai smiled, his voice soft as the wind. "No. I think they've taught me more than any sermon ever could." Tenshin nodded. "Then you've understood. The storm doesn't come to destroy. It comes to show us which part of us is not yet steady." Modern psychology calls this resilience, the ability to recover after adversity. But in Buddhism, it is the serene knowing of the awakened heart, the insight that no storm lasts forever. Only those who refuse to let go keep the storm inside. From that day on, Sangai no longer feared storms. For each time the wind rose, he knew it was but a gentle reminder from the Dharma. When the heart flows with life, every storm becomes a teacher. When you truly understand impermanence, you no longer fear loss. When you accept that you cannot control everything, freedom begins to bloom within. A true practitioner does not pray for a life without storms, only for a heart without turmoil. For when the mind is still, the world's chaos is just wind passing over the surface of a lake, unable to disturb its depth. The Buddha taught, in the mindful heart, even rain is dharma. In the deluded heart, even sunlight becomes suffering. The difference is never in the world, it is always in the mind. And when we learn to bow like the bamboo, we see clearly that every gust of wind is not a curse, but a chance to see whether we are still clinging or already free. Months later, a young monk came to visit Sangai, his eyes clouded with sorrow. He asked softly, "Master, how can I keep my heart from breaking when life is so harsh?" Sangai didn't answer right away. He led the student to the bamboo grove behind the temple, where morning dew still shimmered on tender leaves. He touched a slender stalk and said, "See this. It's small, soft yet full of life, because it doesn't try to be anything. It simply receives." The student bowed his head. "So I should just receive everything?" Sangai smiled, his voice calm like the wind through the grove. "Not just receive. You must see each breeze as it comes. Feel it, but don't let it carry you away. That is meditation, to live within the storm, yet keep your heart at peace, like bamboo in the wind, bending, standing, never breaking." That evening, Tenshin sat quietly by the stream, watching the bamboo sway in the golden light after rain. The wind whispered through the leaves, creating a melody, like a song from far away. He murmured softly, his voice blending with the flowing water. The bamboo have finished their song of the storm, but perhaps it is the human heart where the wind still seeks to rest. His words felt like the closing note of their long journey, the journey from resisting the wind to moving with it while keeping one's root. Both Sangai and Tenshin now understood steadiness does not come from fighting, but from knowing when to bow and how to flow without losing one's true nature. As the sun sank behind the mountains, the sky turned pale gold. Sangai watched plum blossoms drift in the evening breeze and whispered, "Perhaps it's time to learn how to see the flower without trying to hold it." Tenshin said nothing. He only smiled, for he knew his friend had truly learned the lesson whispered by the wind and the bamboo, the strength of softness and the freedom of letting go. The night had fallen, and the monastery was bathed in a dim moonlight soft as the breath of silence. The wind passed through the pine trees, sounding like the sigh of the earth. In that stillness, only one room remained lit. Dido, a young monk newly arrived for training, sat quietly by a wooden table. Dark circles shadowed his eyes as he moved the prayer beads slowly through his fingers. Each bead marked another sleepless night. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "I meditate every night, but the more I sit, the more awake I become. My mind is like a wild horse. The harder I try to hold it, the faster it runs." From the temple porch, Master Kenji listened in silence, then stepped inside. He placed a teapot down and poured 2 cups. The rising steam drifted gently into the cold night. "You can't sleep," Kenji said. "But what is it that you fear?" Daito lowered his gaze. "I'm afraid I've practiced for so long and made no progress. I'm afraid of wasting time. I try to stay mindful. But the more I try, the more tired and tangled my mind becomes." The master looked out the window at the moonlight spilling through the lattice, his voice calm and deep like still water. "The one who seeks wakefulness but forgets how to rest is like someone who tries to swim but forgets how to float. You do not lose sleep because you practice too little. You lose it because you try too hard. Mindfulness is not about forcing the mind. It's about resting in awareness, like a lake that reflects everything without trying to hold its image." The words settled over Dido in silence. Moonlight brushed across his face where the mind began to learn how to breathe again. Dido's story reveals a paradox familiar to every spiritual seeker. We chase peace by trying to achieve it. The harder we strive, the tenser the mind becomes. The more we try to be calm, the further calmness drifts away. The Buddha once said, "When a string is too tight, it will snap. When it is too loose, it cannot make a sound." The middle way, that is the path to awakening. Daito was a reflection of the modern practitioner trying to control the mind, forcing himself to stay alert, disciplined, perfect. He believed mindfulness meant never allowing distraction, yet the more he resisted, the louder the mind rebelled. Because meditation is not about holding it, is about releasing, not about forcing silence, but seeing restlessness clearly without interfering. Kenji's gentle gaze reached deep into Daito's heart. You meditate not to kill thoughts, but to watch them arise and fade. You cannot sleep because you're trying to keep the mind from thinking, while thought itself is born and dies naturally. Holding is another form of delusion. The insight struck Daito like a bell in the night. He realized that peace does not come from resisting the storm, but from watching every ripple without grasping it. That night beneath the silent moon, sleep came not because his meditation succeeded, but because his mind stopped needing success. Kenji led Daito outside. The moon had risen high, its silver light draping the courtyard like a thin veil. In the center stood a still pond reflecting the crystal sky so clearly that it was hard to tell where the water ended and the heavens began. Kenji pointed to the pond. "What do you see?" "The moon," Daito answered. "Did you need to try hard to see it?" "No, master. The water is simply still." Kenji smiled, eyes soft as moonlight through the leaves. "That is meditation. You don't need to force the mind to be quiet. Just stop disturbing it. When you stop trying to be calm, calmness arises on its own. When you stop trying to be awake, awareness appears by itself." He picked up a small stone and tossed it gently into the pond. The water rippled, the moon shattered into 100 shimmering fragments. "This," he said, "is what happens when you try to control. You think you're meditating, but in truth, you're throwing stones into the lake of your own mind." Daito stood silently. The night breeze passed by. The ripples faded. The moon reformed whole and bright as if it had never been broken. A warm stillness spread through his chest, soft as the breath of the earth. He understood then the moon was never lost, only disturbed. When the mind stops trying to be peaceful, peace returns by itself, gentle as moonlight resting on a lake, effortless, uninvited, yet always there. Kenji poured another cup of tea. The steam rose and dissolved into the night. His voice was quiet but deep like wind through the pines. "You know, sleep itself is a kind of meditation. When you truly let go, the body rests and the mind returns to its quiet nature. People lose sleep, not because their bodies are tired, but because their minds keep running." He chuckled softly, remembering. "I was once like you. I used to think sleeping was a waste of time. I stayed awake for 7 days, chanting sutras, believing diligence would bring enlightenment. When I finally collapsed from exhaustion, I dreamed I was sitting on a mountain. A voice asked, 'Why do you chant the Buddha's name?' I answered, 'To attain enlightenment.' The voice said, 'What kind of enlightenment leaves you this weary?' Kenji smiled, shaking his head. When I woke, I learned to sleep as part of meditation. When the mind is still, each breath is a sutra, not spoken aloud, but lived fully." Daito listened in silence. The moon shimmered in his tea, the surface breathing softly. "Master," he asked, "how can I stop my mind from running?" Kenji's voice flowed like a stream. "You don't stop it. You just notice it. When the mind runs, know it's running. When it rests, know it's resting." Mindfulness is not freezing the mind, it's seeing movement without becoming it. And in that instant, Daito realized even the vanishing smoke before him was meditating. Insomnia, he understood, was not a disease of the body, but a sign of a mind that refuses to stop. Inside everyone there is a quiet voice that never ceases, the voice of fear, regret, worry, unfinished thoughts. By day, the noise of the world covers it, but at night, when everything else falls silent, that voice begins to speak. Meditation does not silence that voice. It teaches you to smile at it, to watch it drift by like leaves on a river. Insomnia happens when you jump into the river trying to stop the current, only to be swept away by your own thoughts. Kenji looked at him and said softly, "You don't need to seek sleep, Daito. Let the night seek you." He pointed to the sky where the moon glowed gently behind drifting clouds. "See that the moon doesn't try to shine. The wind doesn't try to blow. What comes, comes. What goes, goes. If you can live like the moon and the wind, not forcing, not resisting, then sleep will come as naturally as breathing. Dido lifted his gaze. The moon reflected on the pond's surface. He realized sleep is not about shutting down, it is about surrender. Not forcing calm, but ceasing to fight yourself. In the modern world, many are like Dido, not sleepless from noise outside, but from too many voices within unfinished tasks, unspoken worries, unanswered questions, all swirling like a hive of restless bees. And so night becomes a battlefield instead of a place of rest. If you are hearing these words, remember this: sleep is not a reward you must earn. It is an act of release. You don't have to deserve rest, you only have to allow it. Before sleep, don't force the mind to be still. Just remind yourself, you are allowed to let go. Don't push thoughts away. The harder you push, the tighter they cling. Let them drift by like clouds across the sky. When you stop chasing them, the mind will stop running. Breathe deeply. Feel your back supported by the bed, by the earth, by life itself holding you. Each breath is a doorway into peace. Sleep doesn't come when you try to fall asleep. It comes when you accept being awake. That very moment when striving ends is when peace begins. Kenji sat on the porch, the moonlight soft on his gentle face. Dido lay down, his breath slow and even eyes half closed. Kenji whispered, his voice low as the night wind. Sleep is not so different from a small death, Dido. Each night when you allow a part of yourself to die, the ego, the need to be right, to be better, then and only then do you truly begin to live. He paused, then quoted the Buddha. Letting go is peace. The more you grasp, the more you suffer. The more you release, the more you are free. He gently opened Dido's clenched hand. The human heart is the same. When you try to hold on to peace, it slips away. But when you open your hand, you find you never lost it. Peace was there all along. Master Dido murmured, half asleep. How do I practice without fear? Kenji smiled, eyes soft as moonlight on water. Sleep, sleep. Is practice? Yes, said Kenji. When you sleep without anxiety, that is concentration. When you wake without resistance, that is wisdom. Between the two lies the middle way, where practice is neither forcing wakefulness nor seeking rest, but living fully in each breath. Outside, the moon shone quietly as if smiling in silence. The beauty of Zen lies in its wholeness. No separation between waking and sleeping, doing and resting, awareness and dreaming. When the mind abides in presence, every moment becomes meditation. Modern psychology says, sleep comes only when the nervous system feels safe. But in Buddhism, safety is not control. It is seeing clearly that there is nothing to control. When you understand that birth and death, breath and thought, sleep and waking all follow their natural rhythm, the body and mind return to their original harmony. Dido realized that insomnia was not an enemy, but a mirror reflecting how tightly he clung to peace. And when he accepted even his unrest, sleep arrived soft as a leaf settling on water. If tonight you too lie awake, follow what Master Kenji taught Dido. Don't wish the mind to be still, let it move. Don't fight your thoughts. Watch them play like children without scolding, without indulging. Don't force your breath. Let it find its own rhythm. Then whisper to yourself, I am supported. I no longer need to control. That sentence is the key that opens the door to deep rest. Like a pond after the wind, it doesn't need to do anything to become still. It only needs to stop throwing stones. When you stop trying to be peaceful, peace will find you just as the night finds those ready to rest. The moon still shone its light, draping the porch like a veil of quiet mist. The chirping of night insects rose and fell, like the earth's own breathing. Dido slept soundly, his breath soft as wind through bamboo leaves. Kenji watched him, eyes kind, smiling faintly. At last he whispered, "Sometimes enlightenment is simply a dreamless sleep." He blew out the oil lamp. The final flame faded into moonlight. Stepping onto the porch, he gazed at the clear sky where the full moon reflected on the pond below, like a silent prayer of the universe. Kenji sat down, crossed his legs, and closed his eyes. In the cool night breeze, he merged with the vast stillness. No master, no student, no night, no day. Only a boundless silence, the peace that no one creates yet has always been there, like the moon that never ceases to shine. As you begin to relax into your breath, let the story of Dido and Kenji become your own lullaby. Let the wind outside become a sutra, each breath the steady drum of life itself. The night is not against you. It is inviting you home to the stillness that was never lost. Let go of the need to understand, to be good, to be better. Let go even of the wish to be awake or at peace. Peace does not depend on waking or dreaming, it simply is. Now close your eyes. Listen to the wind at your window. Feel your heartbeat slowing, your breath touching the ground like a grain of dust returning to its source. No effort, no resistance, only presence. In that stillness, there is no sleeplessness, no searching, only you and the night, melting into the original quiet where waking and dreaming are one. And there you realize peace never comes, because it never left. As this night's journey draws to a close, you have not just heard a story, you have walked a silent path back to yourself. Every teaching, every image, every breath has been only a small doorway to one truth. Peace was never gone. It is here like the still lake, waiting for you to stop throwing stones of worry, of must, of should. Now there is nothing to hold or to understand. Let these words dissolve into you like dew sinking into the soil, soft, deep, natural. Your breath is peaceful. Your heart beats in rhythm with the universe, and all of life is holding you more gently than you ever imagined. If you feel even a trace of calm, let it ripple outward like waves on a pond. Thank you for journeying with Buddhism seeds through this night of silence and awakening. If you found peace here, subscribe, like, and share to spread these seeds of calm to others, and leave a few words below, so together we may continue nurturing the light of mindfulness. May you sleep deeply, peacefully, like a leaf settling into the earth. No striving, no struggle, just pure being. Peace is here. And tonight, it sleeps beside you.